The text arrived at 11:27 at night, warning me to stay away because Sloan did not want to see me. I stared at the screen, then called the funeral home to cancel every dime I had paid. Yet I went anyway. As the casket lowered, my billionaire sister leaned in and whispered the words that stopped my heart. She said, "He is not our dad. He is just yours. My name is Luna Kelly, and for 34 years, I operated under the assumption that family was a blood pact. It turns out family is just a line item on a spreadsheet, and mine was constantly in the red." The text message arrived at 11:27 at night. It was short, cold, and surgical. It read simply, "Do not come to the service tomorrow. Sloan does not feel comfortable with you there. Please do not make this harder than it already is." I sat on the edge of my bed in my cramped apartment, the blue light of the phone illuminating the piles of paperwork I had organized on the duvet. "My name is Luna Kelly, and I am the responsible one. I am the one who fixes things. I am the one who pays." The irony of the message felt like a physical blow to the sternum. They were uninviting me from an event that I had effectively produced. I looked down at the invoice from the funeral home. It was stamped "paid in full." The total came to $14,500. I had drained my emergency savings and maxed out 2 credit cards to cover it, because Mom had grabbed my hand in the hospital, her grip surprisingly strong for a dying woman, and made me promise. She wanted the mahogany casket. She wanted the lilies from the specific florist in the next town over. She wanted dignity. Graham, the man I called Dad, had stood in the corner of the hospital room, looking out the window, claiming his grief was too profound to discuss logistics. So, I did what I always did. I stepped up, and now, 6 hours before the service, I was being told to stay away. I did not cry. Crying implies a loss, and at that moment, I did not feel loss. I felt a sudden, violent clarity. It was the feeling of a diver realizing the oxygen tank on their back is actually filled with carbon monoxide. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the funeral home. It was late, but I knew the night director forwarded calls to his cell. When Mr. Henderson answered, his voice was thick with sleep. I did not apologize. "I need to cancel the contract." I said, my voice sounded calm, which terrified me more than if I had been screaming. "Ms. Kelly, Mr. Henderson asked, confused. "The service is tomorrow morning. Everything is set. I am the contract holder." I said, "I am the one who signed the check. I am exercising my right to cancel the services provided under my name. The flowers, the catering, the premium transport. Cancel it all. But the body," he stammered. "Your mother? Keep her there." I said, "But do not open the doors. Do not put out the flowers I paid for. Do not let the hearse leave the garage if it is on my dime. If they want a funeral, they can pay for it." I hung up. It felt like cutting a lifeline. For decades, my role in the Kelly household was to be the financial emotional support animal. I paid the overdue heating bills. I covered the property tax when Graham forgot. I was the safety net. Tonight, I took the net away. I stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night. I waited for the panic to set in, for the guilt to crush me. But it never came. At 7:15 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson again. "Ms. Kelly," he said, his voice crisp and professional now. "I am calling to inform you that the cancellation order has been voided." "Excuse me," I asked, gripping the phone. "A new payment was processed at 6 a.m. this morning," he said. "The previous funds you provided are being refunded to your cards. The service will proceed as planned. However, the new contract holder has requested some changes to the program." "What changes?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You have been removed from the list of speakers," he said, "and the family seating chart has been adjusted." I hung up. They had not just uninvited me. They had erased me. They had bought me out of my own mother's grief. I showered and dressed in black, not the soft, mourning black of a grieving daughter, but the sharp, armored black of a woman going to war. I drove to the funeral home, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The refund notification hit my phone as I parked. $14,500. Returned like a rejected gift. I walked into the chapel. The air smelled of lilies, the ones I had ordered. Now paid for by someone else. The room was half full. Neighbors from Maple Hollow. Old friends of Mom. People who knew the version of our family that we presented to the world. I walked down the center aisle. Heads turned. I could hear the whispers. People knew I was the one who took care of Mom. They expected me to be greeting them at the door, handing out programs, managing the tears. Instead, I walked past them, my spine rigid, in the front row. Graham Kelly sat like a king in exile. He was wearing a suit I had bought him 3 years ago for a job interview he never went to. He looked tragic and handsome, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. He was staring at the casket with a practiced intensity. As I approached, he did not look at me. He did not flinch. He just stared straight ahead. As if I were a ghost he refused to acknowledge. There was a space next to him, usually reserved for the spouse and children. A black purse was placed on the seat to his right. Guarding it, I did not ask permission. I simply moved the purse to the floor and sat down. Graham stiffened. I could feel the heat radiating off him, a mix of anger and fear. He still did not look at me. "You should not be here. Luna," he hissed under his breath, his lips barely moving. I looked at the casket. "I paid for this dress." "Graham," I whispered back, "I am going to see it worn." He went silent. He was a man who crumbled under direct confrontation, preferring to manipulate from the shadows. My presence was a variable he had not calculated. Then the doors at the back of the chapel opened again. The silence in the room shifted. It became heavier, charged with a different kind of electricity. Sloane had arrived, my younger sister, the one who left Maple Hollow at 18 and never looked back, the one who made the cover of business magazines, the one who sold her tech startup for 9 figures and became a ghost to us, sending checks that Graham cashed and I never saw. She walked down the aisle, and the air seemed to leave the room. She was not wearing traditional mourning clothes. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. Her sunglasses were dark, hiding her eyes, but she was not alone. Walking a step behind her was a man I had never seen before. He was tall, dressed in a black suit that fit him like a second skin. He did not look like a boyfriend or a husband. He scanned the room with the detached, predatory gaze of a security detail or a very expensive lawyer. He carried a leather briefcase, not a Bible. Sloane reached the front row. She stopped in front of Graham. She did not hug him. She did not touch his shoulder. She merely nodded, a gesture devoid of any warmth. Then she turned to me. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, the only sign that she was human. She looked at me for a long moment, studying my face as if she were trying to solve an equation. "Move," she said to Graham. It was not a request. Graham blinked, looking up at her with a mixture of awe and resentment. He shuffled to the left, making space between us. Sloane sat down right next to me, her shoulder pressing against mine. The man in black stood behind us, his back against the wall, a silent sentinel. The service began. The priest spoke about Mom's kindness, her patience, her long suffering. He left out the part about her anxiety, her fear of opening the mail, the way she would hide bank statements in the laundry hamper. I stared at the casket, feeling a numbness spreading through my chest. I tried to remember the last thing Mom said to me. It was about the money. It was always about the money. "Make sure Graham is okay," she had whispered. "Don't let him sink." "Luna." I felt a hand on my arm. I turned. Sloane was leaning in close, her breath warm against my ear. The smell of expensive perfume and stale cigarettes wafted from her. She looked at Graham, who was dabbing his dry eyes with a handkerchief, performing his grief for the audience behind us. Then she looked back at me. Her gaze was intense, terrifyingly lucid. "He is not our dad," she whispered. The words were soft, barely a breath, but they hit me with the force of a freight train. I froze. I looked at her, confusion knitting my brow. I thought she was speaking metaphorically, the way angry children disown their parents. I thought she meant he had not been a good father. But Sloane shook her head slightly, as if reading my thoughts. She leaned closer, her lips brushing my hair. He is just yours. Luna. The world tilted on its axis. The organ music seemed to distort, stretching into a low, dissonant hum. I looked at Graham. I looked at his profile. The nose I thought I had inherited. The jawline I saw in the mirror. If he was just mine, that meant he was my biological father. But it meant he was not hers. I looked at Sloane. We shared the same mother. That was undeniable. But if Graham was not her father, then who was? And why did Graham treat her like the golden child, while I was treated like the help Sloane pulled back, her face composed, staring straight ahead at the casket? She had dropped a bomb in my lap, and then returned to watching the show. My heart hammered against my ribs. Questions flooded my mind, drowning out the priest's eulogy. If he was not her father, did he know? Did Mom know? Was this why Sloane left? My phone buzzed in my clutch. A single, sharp vibration. I should have ignored it. It was a funeral. But the adrenaline was coursing through me, making me irrational. I slipped the phone out, shielding the screen with my hand. It was an automated email from a lending institution. A generic notification. Subject action required. Co-signer verification for loan application. I frowned. I had not applied for a loan. I had just frozen my spending. I opened the email, my thumb hovering over the screen, the details loaded. It was a request for a personal loan. The amount was $25,000. The stated purpose was funeral and bereavement expenses. The primary applicant was Graham Kelly. The co-signer listed was Luna Kelly. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. He had done it again, even here, even now. While sitting 5 feet away from his dead wife, while I sat next to him, he had used my social security number to apply for a loan to pay for a funeral that Sloane had already paid for. He wasn't just grieving, he was cashing in. I looked up from the phone. Graham was sobbing now, his shoulders shaking. The congregation behind us was murmuring in sympathy. I looked at the email again. The application timestamp was 8:30 this morning. He had done it from his phone while waiting for the hearse. Sloane's whisper echoed in my head. He is just yours. I looked at the man who was supposedly my father. He was not just mine. He was my parasite. And he had just tried to feed on me one last time. The silence in my apartment that evening was heavy, a sharp contrast to the murmurs and false sympathies of the funeral service. I had left the cemetery before the reception. I could not stomach the idea of eating cold sandwiches next to the man who had tried to monetize my grief while the dirt was still fresh on my mother's grave. Sloane had disappeared into a black SUV with her security detail, leaving me with nothing but that whispered sentence echoing in my skull. He is not our dad. He is just yours. I sat at my kitchen table, a glass of water sweating onto the wood. I did not drink it. Instead, I opened my laptop. For years, I had told myself that I was helping, that I was the good daughter, the reliable one. In every family, there is casting, roles assigned before we even know how to speak. Sloane was the fragile one, the wild one, the one who needed to be protected from the harsh edges of the world. And I was the concrete. I was the foundation. Mom used to cup my face in her hands, her skin smelling of lavender and anxiety, and say, "Luna, you are so strong. You can handle anything." Sloane is different. She feels things too much. We have to look out for her. I believed her. I wore that strength like a badge of honor, not realizing it was actually a yoke. Being the strong one just meant I was the one they felt comfortable burdening. It meant my needs were always secondary because, surely, Luna could figure it out. Luna always figured it out. I clicked on a folder buried deep in my hard drive. It was password protected. I typed in the code, a sequence of numbers that corresponded to the date I paid off the first major debt Graham had accrued in my name. The file opened. It was a spreadsheet titled Ledger Family Overages.xlsx. It was not a diary of words. It was a diary of numbers. It was the mathematical proof of my exploitation. I had started it 10 years ago, fresh out of college. When Graham had asked to borrow $200 for a utility bill, I had recorded it, thinking I would be paid back. I never was. I scrolled down. The rows went on for pages. August 12th, 2014, $550. Car repair for the sedan. Graham crashed. December 3rd, 2015, $1,200. Property tax. Delinquency notice I found hidden in the kitchen drawer. July 19th, 2018, $4,000. A roof leak that Graham said he had fixed himself, until the water came pouring into the living room, ruining the hardwood. I looked at the totals. Over a decade, I had poured nearly $85,000 into the house on Maple Hollow. That was money for a down payment on my own home, money for a wedding I never had, money for a life I never got to start because I was too busy patching up theirs. But as I looked at the entries from the last 18 months, the pattern changed. The amounts were larger, the frequency was higher, and the explanations were vague. There was a transfer of $3,000 last March. The note in my spreadsheet read simply, "Graham said it was for Mom's specialist." I frowned. Mom had Medicare. She had supplemental insurance. Why did she need $3,000 in cash for a specialist? Then there was a charge for legal fees. $2,500 paid to a firm I did not recognize. When I had asked Graham about it at the time, he had waved his hand and said it was a dispute with a neighbor over a property line. I had believed him. I always believed him because the alternative was to admit that my father was a liar. But now, staring at the screen, the numbers looked different. They looked like evidence. I opened a subfolder where I kept scans of documents. I found the power of attorney form. It was dated 6 months ago. Mom had been weak then, her mind drifting in and out of focus due to the pain medication. Graham had presented the document to me, saying we needed it to manage her medical bills. I had signed as a witness. I zoomed in on the document now. Mom's signature was at the bottom, usually. By that stage of her illness, her handwriting was a tremor, a shaky spiderweb of ink. But this signature was firm. It was looping and confident. It looked like her signature from 10 years ago, not the signature of a dying woman. My stomach turned. I had been in the room, but I had been distracted, making coffee in the kitchen while Graham helped her with the paperwork. Had I actually seen the pen touch the paper? I closed the image and went to my email. The loan notification from the funeral had triggered something in me, a suspicion that perhaps that was not the only time he had tried to use my name. I went to my spam folder, usually. I deleted everything in there without looking. Offers for male enhancement pills, Nigerian princes, and miracle weight loss cures. But today, I scrolled slowly. I saw it. Hidden among the junk was an email from a credit card company. Subject application received. Thank you for your interest. It was dated 3 weeks ago. I searched for the keyword application. The search results filled the screen. There were dozens of them. Confirmations of applications for store credit cards, inquiries for personal lines of credit, notifications of address changes. My heart hammered against my ribs. How had I missed this? Why hadn't I received phone calls usually? When you apply for credit, especially this much of it, the bank calls to verify. I opened one of the confirmation emails from a major bank. It listed the contact information for the applicant. Name Luna Kelly, address 402 Maple Avenue, Maple Hollow, Indiana, phone 555-0198. I froze. My phone number ended in 0199. It was a single-digit difference, a typo. No. A typo happens once. I checked the next email. The same wrong number. I checked a third. The same. It was a trick, a deliberate, calculated maneuver. If the bank called to verify the application, they would dial the number listed. If the person who answered confirmed the identity, the loan would go through. Graham had not just stolen my identity. He had rerouted it. He had created a ghost version of me that lived in his phone, ready to say yes to every debt he wanted to accrue. I grabbed my phone and dialed the fraud department of the bank from the most recent email. It was nearly midnight, but the automated system eventually connected me to a human being. Security department. This is Mark. How can I help you? My voice was steady, the icy calm of disaster management taking over. My name is Luna Kelly. I am looking at an application reference number on my screen. I did not make this application. There was the sound of typing on the other end. One moment. Ms. Kelly, let me pull this up. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. It felt like an hour. Okay, I see the application here, Mark said, his tone shifting from polite to professional. It was submitted online 2 days ago. The status is currently pending verification. I need you to cancel it. I said, and I need to know if there are others. More typing. The clicking of the keys sounded like gunshots in my quiet apartment. Ms. Kelly, Mark said slowly, I am looking at your profile. We show 7 attempts to open lines of credit in the last 4 weeks. 2 were rejected automatically, 3 are pending, 2 were approved and cards were issued. Approved. I felt the blood drain from my face. Where were the cards sent? They were mailed to the address on file. Mark said, 402 Maple Avenue. That is not my address. I said, that is my mother's house. I see, Mark said. And the phone number used for verification. It is incorrect, I said. It is off by 1 digit. There was a pause. Ms. Kelly, I am going to flag this account for fraud immediately. We will freeze the issued cards. But I have to ask, do you know who resides at that address? I closed my eyes. I could see the house, the peeling white paint, the porch swing where Mom used to sit, the office where Graham spent his days, supposedly looking for work, supposedly managing the family affairs. Yes, I whispered. I know who lives there. There is something else, Mark said, his voice lowering slightly, breaking protocol to offer a human warning. The applications, they are coming from the same IP address, and based on the metadata, they are being submitted between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. I looked at the clock on my wall. It was just past midnight. Graham was a night owl. He always had been. He claimed it was his creative time. I realize now that his creativity was entirely focused on how to extract value from the people who loved him. The feeling of betrayal was not a sharp knife. It was a dull, heavy stone in my gut. This was not just desperation. This was a system. He had set up a parallel infrastructure to siphon my creditworthiness. He knew I had a good job. He knew I paid my bills. He saw my credit score not as an achievement, but as a resource to be mined. Thank you. Mark, I said, please freeze everything. I hung up the phone. I went back to the spreadsheet. I added a new column. I titled it Fraud. I began to type in the amounts Mark had mentioned. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. As I typed, a memory surfaced. A memory from when I was 12. I had saved up my allowance for months to buy a specific pair of sneakers. I kept the money in a jar on my dresser. One day, the jar was empty. When I ran to Mom, crying, Graham had come into the room. He told me that he had borrowed it for groceries because things were tight. He told me I was being selfish for caring about shoes when the family needed food. Mom had hugged me and told me I was such a good helper. She made me feel proud that my loss had saved the family. I realize now that they had been training me. They were grooming me to accept theft as love. My phone buzzed again. I looked at it, expecting another fraud alert, but it was a text from a number I did not have saved. You need to check the basement. I stared at the message. I did not know who sent it, but my mind raced back to the house in Maple Hollow. The basement was Graham's domain. It was where he kept his old tax files, his broken tools, his secrets. I looked at the spreadsheet again. The total over 10 years was staggering, but it was just money. The text message suggested something worse. I stood up. I could not stay in this apartment. The walls were closing in. I needed to see. I grabbed my keys and my coat. It was a 2-hour drive to Maple Hollow. I would get there by 3 a.m. The drive was a blur of highway lights and dark thoughts. I thought about Sloane. Why had she come back? Why did she bring a bodyguard? What did she know that I didn't when I pulled up to the house? It was dark. The driveway was empty, save for Graham's old truck. The house looked like a sleeping beast. I parked down the street, not wanting to wake him. I still had my key. I was the one who paid for the new lock on the front door 2 years ago. After all, I walked up the driveway. the gravel crunching softly under my boots. I reached the porch. I put the key in the lock. It turned smoothly. I stepped inside. The house smelled of dust and old paper. The silence was thick. I crept toward the basement door. It was located in the kitchen. As I reached for the handle, I saw a sliver of light coming from underneath the door. He was awake. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the brass knob. If I opened this door, there was no going back. I would not be the dutiful daughter anymore. I would be an intruder. I would be the enemy. But then I remembered the spreadsheet. I remembered the fake phone number. I remembered the signature that looked too strong for a dying woman. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The stairs creaked. I took a step down. "Graham," I called out softly. There was a sudden scuffling sound from below, the sound of paper being shoved into drawers, the sound of a laptop lid snapping shut. "Who is there?" Graham's voice was sharp, fearful. "It is me," I said. Descending the stairs, I reached the bottom. The basement had been converted into a makeshift office. Filing cabinets lined the walls. A shredder sat in the corner, overflowing with strips of white paper. Graham was standing behind a large oak desk. He was wearing his bathrobe. His face was pale in the light of the desk lamp. "Luna," he stammered. "What are you doing here?" "It is 3 a.m. I walked toward the desk. I saw a stack of envelopes. They were addressed to me, but they had been opened. I saw a credit card. Brand new, gleaming gold in the dim light. It had my name on it. I did not answer his question. I looked at the shredder. I looked at the envelopes. I picked up the credit card. "You intercepted my mail." I said. My voice was flat. Graham's eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an excuse. "I was just holding it for you," he said, a nervous smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. "With your mother passing, I knew you would be overwhelmed. I was going to give it to you." I looked at the activation sticker on the card. It had been removed. "You activated it." "Graham," he took a step back. "Luna, you do not understand. The expenses, the funeral. I did it for us." I looked past him, to the wall behind the desk. Tacked to the corkboard were photos, but they were not family photos. They were photos of Sloane. Photos of her leaving her office building in New York. Photos of her getting into cars. Photos taken from a distance. And next to them were printouts of property records. Not just our house, but my apartment building, and Sloane's penthouse listed in a public registry. Graham followed my gaze. He lunged forward, trying to block my view. "Do not look at that," he shouted, his voice cracking. But I had already seen enough. This wasn't just about paying bills. This was surveillance. He wasn't just a desperate father. He was a predator mapping out his prey. And then I saw the map. It was a map of Maple Hollow, but there were red pins stuck in various locations. One was our house, one was the bank, but there was a third pin. It was stuck in a location on the outskirts of town, an old industrial park that had been abandoned for years. Next to the pin was a sticky note with a single word written in Graham's handwriting: collateral. I looked at him. The man who raised me. The man who I thought was just incompetent with money. "What is at the industrial park?" "Graham," I asked. His face hardened. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, ugly sneer. "You are just like her," he spat. "Always asking questions you do not want the answers to. Go home. Luna, before you find something that makes you wish you were the one in that coffin." I stood my ground, but my hands were shaking, because for the first time, I realized that the danger wasn't just financial. I turned to leave, clutching the stolen credit card in my hand. As I reached the top of the stairs, I looked back. Graham was already on the phone, dialing a number. "She is here," he whispered into the receiver. "We have a problem." I ran out of the house, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't know who he was calling, but I knew one thing for certain. The family I had spent my life trying to save was already dead. What was left was something else entirely. Something hungry. The notification arrived at 9:15 in the morning. It was a forward, a digital slip of the tongue sent by my Aunt Linda, a woman who meant well but possessed the technological literacy of a turnip. She had intended to forward the location of the post-funeral brunch to her daughter. Instead, she had forwarded an invitation to a calendar event titled Kelly Estate Reading. The time listed was 10 o'clock. The location was the offices of Holloway and Associates. I stared at my phone. No one had invited me. In fact, based on the icy silence from Graham since I fled the house the night before, I was explicitly excluded. The reading of a will is the final scene of the family tragedy, the moment where the curtain falls and the actors fight over the props. Graham intended to perform this scene without the main antagonist present. I did not shower. I did not change out of the clothes I had worn to invade the basement. I simply brushed my teeth, drank a shot of espresso that tasted like battery acid, and drove to the address listed in the text. Holloway and Associates was located in a strip mall that had seen better days, wedged between a dry cleaner and a payday loan center. It was the kind of law firm that specialized in accidents and quick divorces, places where desperation was the primary currency. I walked through the front door at 9:55. The receptionist, a woman with hair dyed a shade of red that did not exist in nature, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice guarded. "I am here for the Kelly reading," I said. She glanced at a printed list on her desk. I saw her eyes scan down, then up again. "I am sorry," she said. "I do not have a Luna Kelly on the list of attendees. Mr. Kelly was quite specific about who was expected." "I bet he was," I said. I walked past her desk toward the heavy oak door at the end of the hallway. "Ma'am, you cannot go in there," she shouted, scrambling to stand up. I ignored her. I gripped the handle of the conference room door and shoved it open. The room was small and smelled of stale coffee and lemon polish. Graham sat at the head of the table, looking like a man who had just been interrupted in the middle of a magic trick. To his right sat a man I assumed was Holloway, a heavy-set individual with a tie that was too short for his torso. Graham's face went white. "Luna," he said, half rising from his chair. "We were just handling the administrative details. There was no need to bore you with this." I walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table and sat down. I placed my purse on the table with a heavy thud. "I love administrative details." "Graham," I said, "I live for them. Please, continue." "Mr. Holloway cleared his throat. He looked at Graham, then at me, clearly assessing the risk of a physical altercation. "Ms. Kelly," he said, smoothing out a file folder. "While you are a beneficiary in the technical sense, your father, excuse me, Mr. Kelly felt that given the emotional strain you are under, it would be best to handle the reading privately. The will is quite standard." "Read it," I said. Before Holloway could speak, the door opened again. The air in the room shifted instantly. It became colder, sharper. Sloane walked in. She was still wearing the charcoal suit from the funeral, or perhaps a different one that looked exactly like it. She did not look tired. She looked razor sharp. The man in black, the security detail, stood outside the door and closed it behind her. She looked at Graham, who seemed to shrink in his seat. Then she looked at me. Her gaze was not warm, it was calculating. She was measuring me, deciding if I was a liability or an asset. "You are actually here," she said, sounding mildly surprised. "I received an invite," I lied. Sloane pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. She placed a sleek silver phone on the table and tapped the screen. "Record," she said to the room. "Mr. Holloway bristled. "Ms. Mercer, I do not think that is necessary. This is a private family matter." Sloane looked at him. Her eyes were dead calm. "Everything is necessary when Graham is involved," she said. "Proceed." Holloway sighed, realizing he had lost control of the room. He opened the folder, the last will and testament of Maria Kelly. He began. He started reading in a drone, a rapid-fire legal mumble designed to induce sleep. I listened to the clauses, everything to Graham, the house, the car, the contents of the accounts. It was standard for a spouse, but then came the debts. Holloway paused. He adjusted his glasses. As for the outstanding liabilities, the estate acknowledges the following encumbrances: the primary mortgage on the property at 402 Maple Avenue, and the secondary home equity line of credit, established 18 months ago. I sat up straighter. A home equity line of credit, a HELOC. How much, I asked. Holloway looked annoyed at the interruption. The principal balance on the line of credit is $150,000. The room spun. $150,000. Mom and Graham had paid off the house 10 years ago. I remembered the party they threw. Where had a mortgage-sized debt come from in the last year and a half? Holloway continued. As this is a joint liability, the responsibility for repayment falls to the surviving co-signers and the estate. Co-signers, I asked. Plural. Holloway pulled a document from the stack. Yes, the loan was secured against the equity of the home, with Mr. Graham Kelly and Ms. Luna Kelly listed as guarantors. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at Graham. He was studying his fingernails, refusing to meet my eyes. I never signed a home equity line, I said. My voice was very quiet. Holloway sighed. The sound of a man dealing with a hysterical woman. Ms. Kelly, I have the document right here. It is notarized. Show me, I said. He slid the paper across the polished wood. I looked at the signature block. There was Graham's signature, bold and sprawling, and below it, there was a signature that read, Luna Kelly. It was a good forgery, better than the ones on the credit card applications, but it had a tell. The loop on the L was too wide. I made my loops tight. This is not my signature, I said, looking up. Graham finally spoke. His voice was trembling with fake outrage. Luna, do not do this. Do not dishonor your mother's memory by lying about money. You agreed to help us. You said you would do whatever it took to keep the house running. You signed that paper at the kitchen table. Do you not remember? You were so stressed at work. Maybe you forgot. Gaslighting. He was trying to rewrite my reality in real time. I did not sign this, I repeated. And I certainly did not agree to give you $150,000 to spend on what? Graham. Where is the money? It went to medical bills, Graham shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Your mother's care was expensive. Sloane spoke for the first time since the reading began. We checked the medical billing. Graham, she said. Her voice was bored. Insurance covered 90%. The out-of-pocket maximum was $6,000. Where is the other $144,000? Graham's mouth opened and closed. Holloway intervened. Regardless of the dispute over the allocation of funds, the document is legally binding. The bank will call the note due upon the death of the primary borrower as a cosigner. Ms. Kelly, you are liable. I looked at the lawyer. He knew. He had to know. He was too calm about a six-figure discrepancy. Read the rest, Sloane commanded. Holloway hesitated. That is the substance of the financial. Read the rest. Sloane interrupted. The codicil. The addendum dated 3 weeks ago. Holloway froze. He looked at Graham. Graham looked like he was about to be sick. There is a handwritten note, Holloway said, dismissively, but it was not properly witnessed. It holds no legal weight. It is merely sentimental ramblings. Read it, I said. Holloway picked up a single sheet of yellow legal paper. He held it as if it were contaminated. He read, To my daughters, if you are reading this, I am gone. I am sorry for the mess. I was too weak to stop him. If there are debts that you do not recognize, please do not pay them blindly. I believe there have been irregularities. Please ask for an audit. I was afraid to say no. I am so sorry. My heart broke. It shattered right there in the conference room. Mom knew. She wasn't just a victim of his spending. She was a hostage to it. She had written this note, hidden it, hoping we would find it. That is enough, Graham said, standing up. She was on morphine. She didn't know what she was writing. This is ridiculous. I am the husband. I am the executor. Holloway closed the folder. As I said, the note is not legally binding. It contradicts the formal will. The estate stands as written. Luna, you will need to arrange with the bank regarding the line of credit. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. I sat there, paralyzed by the weight of the debt and the weight of the betrayal. $150,000. If I didn't pay it, They would take the house, no. They would come after me. They would garnish my wages. They would ruin the credit I had spent my life building. Sloane stood up. She picked up her phone. She leaned over the table, looking Graham dead in the eye. "You think you won," she said. "You think because you have a lawyer who bought his degree online and a forged signature, you are safe," Graham sneered. "Get out. Sloane, go back to your city." Sloane turned to me. "Come on, Luna." I stood up, my legs feeling heavy. We walked out of the office, leaving Graham and Holloway in the silence of their conspiracy. In the hallway, the receptionist pretended to be typing. We walked out into the harsh sunlight of the parking lot. I felt like I couldn't breathe. $150,000. Sloane stopped by her SUV. The security guard opened the door for her. She turned to me. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, black object. It was a USB drive. She pressed it into my hand. Her fingers were cold. "What is this?" I asked. "Mom gave this to the nurse at the hospice." Sloane said, "She told the nurse to give it to me only if Graham tried to take the house." I looked at the drive. "Why didn't you bring this up in there?" I asked. "Because Holloway is his creature," Sloane said. "If he knows this exists, it will disappear. He will burn it, shred it, or bury it. You need to see what is on it first." "Why me?" I asked. "You are the one with the resources." Sloane put her sunglasses back on. "Because, Luna," she said, "I am the one he hates, but you are the one he underestimates. He thinks you are just a wallet. He does not think you have the stomach to take him down." She got into the car. "Prove him wrong," she said. The door slammed shut. The SUV pulled away, leaving me standing in the parking lot of a strip mall, holding a piece of plastic that felt heavier than a brick. I got into my car. I locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the USB drive twice before I could plug it into the adapter on my laptop. I opened the File Explorer. There was only one folder on the drive. The name of the folder was in all caps. "Paternity do not discuss until funeral." I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked. This was it. The secret that Sloane had whispered. The reason for the difference in how we were treated. The reason Graham felt entitled to my life but afraid of hers. I double-clicked the folder. Inside were 3 PDF files and 1 audio recording. I opened the first PDF. It was a scanned document. It looked old. The paper yellowed even in the digital image. It was a birth certificate, my birth certificate, but it was different from the one I had in my files. The one I used for my passport listed Graham Kelly as the father. This one, the original one, had a different name in the box for father. The name was typed in old-fashioned typewriter font. It read, "Unknown." I scrolled down. There was a second page. It was a legal affidavit, signed by my mother 34 years ago. It stated that the biological father was aware of the pregnancy, but had relinquished all rights in exchange for anonymity. I opened the second file. It was a bank transfer record from the same year I was born. A transfer of $10,000 from an account held by a trust. The trust name was vague. The Archway Foundation. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Graham had married Mom when I was 2 years old. I had always been told he adopted me, that my biological father had died in a car crash before I was born. That was the family lore, the tragic romance. But this suggested a transaction. I opened the third file. It was a letter, handwriting I recognized as Graham's. But it was younger, less jagged. It was addressed to my mother, Maria. It read, "I will do it. I will give the girl my name. I will raise her. But you have to understand the cost. I am saving you from shame. You owe me. And I will expect that debt to be paid, every day, for the rest of our lives." I covered my mouth with my hand. He hadn't adopted me out of love. He hadn't married her to save her. He had married her as a business arrangement. I was the overhead. And he had been charging her rent for my existence for 3 decades. That was why he felt no guilt stealing from me. In his mind, I was a product he had purchased. I was his property. I looked at the audio file. I was terrified to play it. But then I remembered the HELOC. I remembered the smirk on his face in the office. I clicked play. The sound was grainy. It sounded like it had been recorded on a phone hidden in a pocket. I heard Mom's voice. She sounded weak, breathless. "Graham, please," she said. "Luna has done enough. Do not ask her to sign another loan." Then I heard Graham's voice. It was low, menacing. "She is my investment. Maria," he said, "I have put 30 years into that girl. I am just withdrawing my dividends. And if you say a word to her, I will tell her the truth about where she came from. I will tell her that her real father didn't die. I will tell her he paid to get rid of her. Do you think she will survive that, the dutiful little Luna? It would break her." The recording ended with the sound of Mom weeping. I sat in my car, tears streaming down my face. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. Pure, molten rage. He thought the truth would break me. He thought knowing I was abandoned would make me weak. He was wrong. Knowing I was not his daughter didn't break me. It liberated me. I wiped my face. I looked at the legal office where he was probably still sitting, congratulating himself on another successful manipulation. He is not our dad. He is just yours. No, he wasn't even mine. He was just a man who had made the mistake of stealing from a woman who had nothing left to lose. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going back to work. I had a phone call to make. The number was on the business card Sloan had slipped into the folder with the USB drive. Rowan Pike, financial forensic investigator. It was time to audit the books, and I was going to make sure the balance was zero. The address Sloan sent me led to a place that did not look like a place. It was a heavy, unmarked steel door in an alleyway behind the chaotic bustle of the financial district. There was no sign, only a camera lens staring down like a judgment. I looked at the camera, and the door clicked open with a heavy, magnetic thud. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of expensive scotch and old leather. It was a private members club, the kind of place where decisions about the gross domestic product were made over ice cubes. The room was dimly lit, but I saw her immediately. Sloan was sitting in a high-backed booth in the far corner, a glass of clear liquid in front of her. I walked over. The distance between the door and her table felt like a mile. We were sisters. But looking at her, I felt like we were standing on opposite banks of a wide, toxic river. On her bank, there was safety, power, and the kind of money that insulates you from reality. On my bank, there was debt, deception, and a man who viewed me as an annuity. I slid into the booth opposite her. I did not order a drink. "You look like hell," Sloan said. It was not an insult. It was an observation. "I just found out I was purchased," I said, my voice hoarse, "and that the man I spent my life serving is not my father. So, excuse me if I'm not camera ready." Sloan took a sip of her drink. She placed the glass down with a precise, soft click. "He is not my father either," she said. "I know," I snapped. "That is what you whispered at the funeral. That is why you are the billionaire and I am the co-signer, because you had a real dad, and I had whatever Graham is." Sloan shook her head slowly. "You think that is why I am here? You think I flew in from Zurich just to rub my pedigree in your face?" "It crossed my mind," I said. "You have been gone a long time. Sloan, you missed the decline. You missed the nights Mom cried because she couldn't balance the checkbook. You missed the way Graham would scream until the veins in his neck popped." "I didn't miss it," Sloan said quietly. "I escaped it." She leaned forward, the ambient light catching the sharp angle of her cheekbone. "Graham is not my biological father," she continued. "Mom had an affair with a man named Cyrus Mercer. He was wealthy, married, and very powerful. When she got pregnant with me, Graham found out. He didn't leave her. He leveraged it. He agreed to stay, to keep the family image intact, to raise me as his own. But in exchange, he demanded control, total control over Mom's finances, and eventually, over the support payments my biological father sent." I stared at her. The narrative of our childhood was dissolving in front of me. "So he blackmailed Mom." I said, "He managed her." Sloan corrected. "He kept the paternity secret to keep the checks coming. But I found out when I was 18. That is why I left. Luna, I didn't leave you. I left him. I told him if he ever tried to control me, I would burn his world down. So he let me go." But he kept you. Because I was the one he could use. I whispered, because you were the one who loved him, she said. Her voice softened, losing its corporate edge. You were the faithful one, the one who believed in the family. He preyed on that. Luna. He weaponized your loyalty. I felt a surge of defensive anger. It was a reflexive habit, protecting the family name even now. So why come back now, I asked, to watch the collapse? No, Sloane said. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table. I opened it. It was a printout of a call log. 6 months ago. She said, Mom called me. I looked at the date. It was late at night. She was crying. Sloane said, she was hysterical. She said Graham was getting desperate. He had burned through the last of the trust money. He was starting to open accounts in your name. She said, he is going to drag Luna down with him. He is going to bury her in debt so deep she will never get out. I looked up at Sloane. Mom knew. She tried to stop him. Sloane said, but she was sick. She was weak. And she was terrified of him. She begged me to help you. She made me promise that when she was gone, I would step in. I sat back against the leather booth. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. Mom hadn't been complicit. She had been a prisoner. And in her final months, her worry wasn't for herself. It was for me. So I did some digging. Sloane said, I didn't want to come here with just accusations. I wanted ammunition. She gestured to the empty seat next to me. A man approached the table. He was not the security guard from the funeral. This man was older, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a rumpled suit and carried a thick file folder. Luna, this is Rowan Pike, Sloane said. The man nodded and sat down. He didn't offer a handshake. He just opened the file on the table. Ms. Kelly, Rowan said. His voice was gravelly, the voice of a man who had seen too many bad things to be surprised anymore. I specialize in forensic accounting and financial abuse within domestic partnerships. Your sister hired me to run a background check on Graham Kelly. He spun the file around so I could see it. It was a timeline, but it wasn't just of his life in Maple Hollow. It went back 40 years. Graham Kelly is not his real name, Rowan said, or rather, it is one of 5 names he has used since 1980. I looked at the list. Graham Kendall, Gregory Cale, Gary King. He moves in cycles, Rowan explained, tapping the paper with a thick finger. He finds a partner, usually a woman with assets or a steady income but low self-esteem. He integrates himself into their finances. He maximizes the credit. He drains the equity. And when the well runs dry, or when the legal pressure gets too high, he declares bankruptcy, changes states, and starts over. I felt sick. It wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't just incompetence. It was a business model. He has done this before I asked. 3 times that we can prove. Rowan said, in Ohio, in Florida, and now in Indiana. But this time, he stayed longer, because of the children, because of the leverage he had over your mother regarding Sloane's paternity. It gave him a steady stream of income he didn't have to work for. But the stream dried up. Sloane said, when I turned 21, the trust payments stopped coming to him. They came to me, and I cut him off. That is when he started looking for a new source. Me, I said. Rowan nodded. You were the backup generator. He groomed you to be the provider. He shifted the debt to you slowly, so you would get used to the weight. But now that your mother is gone, he is accelerating. The funeral loan, the credit cards, the home equity line. He is cashing out. Ms. Kelly, he is preparing to burn this identity and leave you with the ashes. The room seemed to tilt. All those years of lectures about responsibility. All those times he told me I was the only one holding the family together. It was all a script. He was a vampire. And I was just the latest vein. What do I do? I asked. My voice was trembling. But I forced it to steady. I cannot pay that debt. Rowan, I have $12,000 in savings and a leased car. $150,000 will destroy me. Rowan pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it on top of the file. "We stop the bleeding first," he said. "Right now, tonight." He took out a pen and flipped the file to a blank page. "Step 1, he said. "We place a fraud alert on all 3 major credit bureaus. Not a standard alert, an extended fraud victim alert. It requires a police report, which we will discuss in a moment. Step 2, he continued. "We freeze your credit. No one, not even you, can open a new account without a PIN number that only you possess. Step 3, we request a full inquiry report. We need to see every single time Graham has tried to use your social security number in the last 5 years. We dispute everything, every hard inquiry, every account you did not sign for physically." I looked at the list. It seemed overwhelming. "And the police?" I asked. Sloane looked at me. Her expression was unreadable. "To get the extended alert and to invalidate the debt, you have to file a police report for identity theft," she said. "You have to name the perpetrator." I looked down at my hands. Arresting Graham, the man who taught me to ride a bike, the man who sat through my high school graduation, clapping louder than anyone, even knowing what I knew now. The idea of putting him in handcuffs felt like a violation of nature. "I can't," I whispered. "Not yet. I can't be the one to send him to jail." Sloane started to speak, perhaps to argue, but she stopped herself. She looked at Rowan. Rowan nodded. "We can file an affidavit of identity theft with the Federal Trade Commission first," he said. "It creates a paper trail without immediately triggering an arrest warrant. It is enough to freeze the banks. But Ms. Kelly, you have to understand. He will not stop because you ask him to. He will only stop when he hits a wall. You have to build that wall." I nodded. "I can do the freeze," I said. "I can lock the door." "Good," Sloane said. She reached out and touched my hand. It was the first time she had made physical contact since the funeral. "You are not alone in this anymore. Luna, he isolated you to control you. That ends today." Rowan closed the file. "There is one more thing," he said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming even more serious. I looked at him, bracing myself. "We have been reviewing your mother's medical records," he said. "Sloane gave me access as part of the investigation." "What about them?" I asked. "Mom died of heart failure. It was a complication from her long-term condition." Rowan exchanged a look with Sloane, a look that terrified me. "The timeline of her decline matches perfectly with the timeline of the home equity line approval," Rowan said. "The stress on her heart, it accelerated rapidly in the last 6 months." I stared at him. "What are you saying I am asking?" Rowan said, leaning in. "Are you absolutely certain that her death was natural? Or is it possible that the pressure applied to her to sign those documents, the arguments, the threats? Is it possible that her heart didn't just fail, but was pushed?" The air in the club seemed to vanish. I couldn't breathe. I thought about the night Mom died. Graham had been in the room with her. He had come out and told me she was gone. He hadn't looked sad. He had looked relieved. "He killed her," I whispered. "Not with a gun or a knife," Sloane said softly. "But if you chase a person with a weak heart until they collapse, is it murder? Or is it just aggressive management?" Rowan pulled out a document. It was a copy of the autopsy report request form. Graham waived the autopsy. Rowan said, "He signed the waiver 2 hours after she died. He said he didn't want to disturb her peace." I felt a cold rage crystallize in my chest. It was harder than diamond. He waived it because he didn't want anyone to see the cortisol levels. I said, "He didn't want anyone to know she died scared." I looked at Sloane. I looked at Rowan. "Lock it all down." I said, "Freeze the credit, file the affidavit, and get me that inquiry report." I stood up. "Where are you going?" Sloane asked. "I am going to the bank," I said. "If he wants a war over the assets, I am going to make sure there is nothing left to steal." The memory hit me while we were stopped at a red light on the edge of Maple Hollow. It was not a grand, cinematic flashback. It was a small, quiet moment from 3 years ago. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes after a Thanksgiving dinner that Graham had spent complaining about the turkey being too dry. Mom had come up beside me, drying a platter. She had looked over her shoulder to make sure the living room television was loud enough to cover her voice. "If you ever feel like you are being drained..." "Luna," she had whispered. her eyes fixed on the soapy water. If you ever feel like the walls are closing in and I am not there to hold them up, go to Cedar Bridge, Box 19. At the time, I had laughed it off. I thought she was being dramatic, or perhaps talking about a stash of family jewelry she wanted me to have. I had forgotten about it until now, until the chaos of the funeral and the revelation of the fraud had stripped away the noise of my daily life. Box 19. I looked over at Rowan in the passenger seat. He was reviewing a file on his tablet, his face illuminated by the blue glow. He looked out of place in Maple Hollow, a shark swimming in a koi pond. "We need to make a stop before we go to the house," I said. "Cedar Bridge Community Bank." Rowan looked up. "Do you have an account there?" "No," I said, "but Mom did, and I think she left me a breadcrumb." Cedar Bridge Community Bank was a relic of a different era. It sat on the corner of Main Street, a brick building with white pillars that tried too hard to look like the Parthenon. Inside, it smelled of floor wax and old pennies. The carpet was a faded maroon, worn thin in the heavy traffic areas leading to the tellers. I walked up to the front desk. The woman behind the counter was named Sarah. I knew her vaguely from high school. She had been 2 years ahead of me. She looked tired. "Can I help you?" she asked, her customer service smile faltering when she saw the look on my face. "I need to access a safety deposit box." I said, "Number 19. It is in the name of Maria Kelly. I am the executor and the beneficiary." I placed the death certificate and the temporary executor paperwork that Sloane's legal team had rushed through on the counter. Sarah picked up the papers. She adjusted her glasses. "I am so sorry about your mother." "Luna," she said softly. She was a sweet lady. She typed something into her computer. Then she frowned. "That is strange," she said. My stomach tightened. "What is strange?" "Mr. Kelly was here last Tuesday," she said. "He had a power of attorney document. He was very insistent on opening Box 19. I felt Rowan step closer to me, his presence a silent wall of support. "Did you let him in?" I asked. My voice felt tight, like a wire pulled to the breaking point. Sarah shook her head. "No, your mother. She was very specific when she opened this box 10 years ago. She put a flag on the account. It says, 2 keys required, or death certificate presented by Luna Kelly in person." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Mom had known. Even 10 years ago, she had known that a piece of paper signed by Graham wouldn't be enough. She had built a failsafe just for me. "He was not happy," Sarah whispered, glancing around to make sure her manager wasn't listening. "He made a scene. He said the flag was a mistake, but the system wouldn't let me bypass it. He is not happy about a lot of things lately." I said. Sarah led us back to the vault. It was a heavy steel door that required a buzz from the manager's desk to open. Inside, the walls were lined with rows of silver boxes, each with 2 keyholes. Sarah used her master key on the first lock of Box 19. I used the key I had found on Mom's keychain, the one I had thought was for a shed or a filing cabinet. It turned with a satisfying click. Sarah slid the long metal box out and carried it to a small private room. "I will give you some privacy," she said, closing the door behind her. I sat down at the small table. Rowan stood by the door, watching me. "Open it," he said gently. I lifted the lid. The box was not full of gold or diamonds. It was full of paper. The smell of old documents wafted up musty, dry, and smelling faintly of Mom's lavender perfume. On top was a white envelope. On the front, written in Mom's shaky handwriting, were the words, "Luna Reed after funeral." My hands trembled as I picked it up. The seal was unbroken. I used my fingernail to slit the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper, covered in blue ink. I began to read. "My dearest Luna, if you are reading this, I am free, and I'm so sorry that my freedom comes at the cost of your pain. I know what you must be finding out. I know about the debts. I know about the loans. I want you to know that I fought him. For years, I fought him. But Graham is like water. He finds every crack. I need to apologize for the role I made you play. I always told you that you were the strong one. I told you that you could handle anything. I said that because I needed you to be a shield. I used your stability as a cushion to protect Sloan, and then to protect myself. I was a coward. Luna, I was so afraid that if I stood up to him, he would burn the house down with us inside. So I let him chip away at you instead. I let him treat you like a resource because I was too terrified to treat you like a daughter who needed protection. There are things in this box that will help you. The house, he thinks he owns it. He doesn't. And the money from Sloane's father, he thinks he hid it. He didn't. Please forgive me. I loved you more than I loved my own peace, but I wasn't strong enough to prove it. Mom, I put the letter down. A tear fell onto the table, but I wiped it away furiously. She had used me. She admitted it. She had sacrificed my financial future to buy peace in her marriage. It was a bitter pill, but at least it was the truth, and the truth was better than the lies Graham had been feeding me for decades. I looked back into the box. Under the letter was a thick stack of documents. I pulled them out. The first was a deed, but it wasn't the deed to the house in Maple Hollow. It was a deed to a small plot of land 2 towns over. I had never heard of it. Rowan leaned over my shoulder. That is an unimproved lot, he said. Not worth much on its own. Maybe $20,000. I turned the page. Attached to the deed was a transfer document. It transferred the ownership of the Maple Hollow house, our house, into a trust. The Maria Kelly Revocable Trust. Dated 12 years ago. Wait, I said. If the house is in a trust, how did Graham get a home equity line of credit on it? You cannot borrow against a property you do not personally own. Rowan took the paper from me. He scanned it, his eyes narrowing. He couldn't. Rowan said, unless he forged a deed transfer back to himself first. He flipped through the stack. Here it is. He held up a document dated 2 years ago. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring the property from the trust to Graham Kelly and Luna Kelly. Look at the signature for the trustee, Rowan said, pointing to the bottom. It was Mom's signature, but it was wrong. The slant was backwards. It is a forgery, I said. A bad one. And look at the notary stamp, Rowan said. He pointed to the embossed seal. It is from a notary in Florida. Was your mother in Florida 2 years ago? No. I said, she was bedridden. She hadn't left Indiana in 5 years. So the transfer is void, Rowan said. Which means the house is still in the trust. Which means the home equity line is unsecured fraud. The bank doesn't have a lien on the house. They have a lien on a lie. This was huge. It meant they couldn't take the house. It meant the debt was entirely Graham's criminal liability, not a property lien. I dug deeper into the box. There was a printout of an email chain. It was between Graham and a lawyer I didn't know. The subject line was, the Mercer allowance. I read the emails. They were dated from when I was in college. Graham, the girl is 18. The checks are going to stop. We need to divert the final lump sum. Lawyer, if we move it to the offshore account. Sloan will never see it, but the mother has to sign. Graham, she will sign. I will tell her it is for Luna's tuition. I felt sick. Sloane's biological father had sent a lump sum when she turned 18. A goodbye gift. Graham had stolen it. He had stolen it by using my name as the excuse. He had told Mom it was for me, and then he had pocketed it. That was why Sloan thought I was the golden child. She thought I got her money. She thought Mom chose me over her. He played us against each other. I whispered. He made Sloan hate me so she wouldn't look too closely at the books. I reached for the last item in the box. It was a draft of a contract. It was stapled to a brochure for a limited liability company called Janus Holdings. The document was a proposed sale. It was an agreement to sell the Maple Hollow house to Janus Holdings for $1. Why would he sell the house for $1? I asked. Rowan took the document. He studied the structure of the LLC. Janus Holdings isn't a property management firm, he said grimly. Look at the articles of incorporation attached here. Their primary business purpose is debt consolidation and asset liquidation. He looked at me, his face serious. This is a shell. Luna. Graham was planning to transfer the house into this LLC. Then, the LLC would take out massive commercial loans using the house as collateral. Commercial loans are bigger and faster than personal ones. Then, he would declare the LLC bankrupt. The creditors would seize the house, and he would walk away with the cash he borrowed. He tapped the paper. "This isn't a roof over your head," he said. "This is a pipeline." He was building a tunnel to suck the last bit of equity out of the property and funnel it into his own pocket. If he had succeeded, you would have been evicted within 6 months of your mother's death. I sat back, feeling the cold metal of the chair. He wasn't just a bad father, he was an arsonist. He was planning to burn the whole structure down on his way out. There was one last piece of paper at the bottom of the box. It was a single sheet of yellow legal paper, similar to the one the lawyer had waved away at the meeting, but this one was ripped. The bottom half was missing. The edge jagged, as if it had been torn away in a hurry. I picked it up. It was Mom's handwriting again, but it was hurried, frantic. The letters were large and slanted. It read, "I cannot keep it quiet anymore. He is threatening to use the girl. I have to tell someone. The records are in the basement, behind the furnace. If Graham knows the truth about the sentence ended there." The paper was torn. Truth about what I asked. Turning the paper over, there was nothing on the back. Rowan looked at the tear. "This isn't old damage," he said. "Look at the fibers. They are white and crisp. This paper was torn recently. But how I asked. Sarah said he didn't get into the box." Rowan looked at the box itself. He ran his finger along the back hinge. "He didn't get into the box through the front," Rowan said. He pointed to a tiny scratch on the metal hinge at the back of the drawer. "But he might have tried to fish something out." Rowan said, "Or maybe your mother wrote this, tore it herself in a panic, and only put half in." "What about the basement?" I asked. "The note says the records are behind the furnace." I thought about the night before. I had been in the basement. I had seen the shredder. If there were records behind the furnace, I said, feeling a surge of adrenaline, he might not have found them yet, or he might be destroying them right now. "We have to go," I said, grabbing the documents and shoving them into my bag. We stood up. I held the torn note in my hand. If Graham knows the truth about what about money? We already knew about the money, about the paternity. We knew that too. The sentence implied something dangerous, something that Graham didn't know yet, or something he was desperate to keep hidden. "What if it isn't about the past?" Rowan asked, as we walked out of the vault. "What if it is about the future?" I didn't answer. I just walked faster. We had the evidence of the fraud. We had the proof of the theft. But the torn note felt like the fuse to a bomb we hadn't found yet. And the bomb was in the basement of the house where Graham was waiting. The drive from the bank to the house on Maple Avenue took less than 15 minutes, but it felt like traveling back in time. With every mile marker we passed, the confidence I had built up in the safety of the bank vault began to erode. The documents in my bag, the forged deed, the secret letter, the proof of the stolen trust fund felt heavy against my side. They were weapons, certainly, but I was walking into the den of a creature who had been hunting me since the day I was born. Rowan drove in silence. He seemed to understand that I was calibrating myself for the violence of the confrontation. Not physical violence, necessarily, though after seeing the desperation in Graham's eyes the night before, I did not rule it out. This was emotional violence, the kind that leaves no bruises but breaks bones all the same. We pulled into the driveway. Graham's truck was still there. The house looked innocent in the afternoon sun. The hydrangeas Mom had planted were beginning to wilt, a subtle reminder that the caretaker was gone. I stepped out of the car. Rowan shut off the engine and opened his door. But I held up a hand. "Give me a minute," I said. "I need to walk in alone." Rowan looked at me, his eyes dark and assessing. "I will be right behind you," he said. 10 seconds. I walked up the porch steps. The wood creaked under my boots. I reached for the handle. But before I could touch it, the door swung open. Graham stood there. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn to the lawyer's office, but he had taken off the tie. His top button was undone, exposing the crepey skin of his neck. He looked ragged, but his eyes were sharp, darting past me to the car where Rowan was standing. "You came back," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I came to get Mom's things." I said, keeping my voice flat. "I want her coat, and the box of letters from her dresser." Graham did not move. He filled the doorway, his hand gripping the frame. "You do not have the right to ransack this house." "Luna," he said. "You are not the owner. The will is clear. I have every right." I said, "I am her daughter, and until probate is settled, I am allowed access to personal effects. Move, Graham." He did not move. Instead, he leaned forward. I could smell stale coffee and fear on his breath. "The bank called me," he said. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "They said the payment on the line of credit is past due. They are going to call the note. Luna, they want the full $150,000 by Friday." I looked at him. He was doing it again, trying to induce panic, trying to make me feel like we were partners on a sinking ship. "I know." I said. "So you need to write a check," he said, his eyes widening with urgency. "You have that savings account, and your retirement fund. If we pool it, we can make the interest payment. We can buy time." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He had stolen my identity, forged my signature, and now he was asking me to liquidate my future to cover his theft. "There is no Graham," I said, "and there will be no check." His face hardened. "What are you talking about? If we do not pay, they take the house. Let them take it," I said. He flinched as if I had slapped him. "You do not mean that," he said. "This is your mother's legacy." "No," I said. "It is your crime scene, and I am done paying for the cleanup." I called the credit bureaus. "Graham, I froze everything. The cards, the loans, the applications you made at 3 a.m. It is over. The tap is dry." For a second, I saw pure panic in his eyes. It was the look of a man who pulls the trigger and hears a click instead of a bang. But then, just as quickly, the mask of the concerned father slammed back into place. "You froze it?" he asked, his voice trembling with fake concern. "Luna, honey, who told you to do that? You do not understand how these things work. Freezing it makes us look guilty. It triggers audits. You are listening to bad advice. Is it Sloan? Is she poisoning you against me?" He reached out to touch my shoulder. I took a step back. "Do not touch me," I said. At that moment, Rowan stepped up onto the porch. The wood groaned under his weight. Graham looked up. He saw Rowan standing there, silent and imposing in his rumpled suit. Graham's eyes narrowed. He stared at Rowan's face, searching his memory. "I told you people to stay away," he snarled. I frowned. What people Rowan had introduced himself as a forensic accountant. But Graham was reacting as if he were something else entirely. Graham took a step toward Rowan, pointing a shaking finger at his chest. "You think you can just show up here?" Graham shouted. "I paid you off in Cleveland. The deal was done. You have no business following me here. Miller?" The name hung in the air. Miller. Rowan did not blink. He did not look confused. He simply stared at Graham with a look of absolute zero. "My name is Rowan Pike," he said calmly. "But it is interesting that you think I am someone named Miller from Cleveland. Perhaps Mr. Miller is another person you owe money to." Graham froze. He realized his mistake instantly. He had confused Rowan with a ghost from his past, another enemy in a long line of enemies. He paled, realizing he had just handed us another thread to pull. "I mistook you for someone else," Graham stammered, backing up against the doorframe. "My eyes are not what they used to be." Sloane's voice cut through the tension like a razor. "Your eyes are fine, Graham. It is your memory that is getting sloppy. You have told so many lies you cannot remember which character you are playing today." I turned. Sloane was walking up the driveway. She looked immaculate, as always, but there was a darkness in her expression that matched the storm brewing in my gut. Graham looked from me to Rowan to Sloane. He was outnumbered. He was surrounded. "Get out of my house," he hissed. "All of you, or I will call the police. Call them." I challenged. "Please, I would love to show them the notary stamp from Florida on the deed transfer. I would love to show them the credit card applications on your laptop." Graham's mouth snapped shut. He stepped aside, defeated for the moment. I walked past him into the hallway. The house felt cold. It was the same hallway I had walked down 1,000 times, but now I saw the cracks in the plaster, the dust on the baseboards. I saw the neglect he had hidden behind his charm. I went to the coat rack by the door. Mom's favorite coat. A beige trench coat she had worn for 20 years was hanging there. It still smelled like her. I reached out and took it off the hook. I hugged it to my chest, closing my eyes for a second. As I squeezed the fabric, I felt something hard in the pocket. I reached inside. My fingers brushed against a small, jagged piece of metal. I pulled it out. It was a key. It was old, brass, and tarnished. It had a piece of masking tape wrapped around the head with a number written on it in faded marker 04. It was not a house key. It looked like a padlock key, or a key to a storage unit. "What is this?" I whispered. Before I could examine it further, a hand shot out and snatched it from my grasp. Graham had lunged from the doorway. He grabbed the key with a speed that belied his age. "That is mine," he shouted, clutching the key to his chest. He was breathing hard, his eyes wild. He wasn't acting anymore. He was terrified. I looked at his hand, white-knuckled around the piece of brass. That was in Mom's coat. I said, "She was holding it for me." He lied. "It is for the shed. The tool shed. The tool shed has a combination lock." "Graham," I said, "I bought it for you." He took a step back, cornered. "It is none of your business," he screamed. "Why can you not just leave it alone? Why do you have to dig up everything?" Sloane stepped into the hallway. She looked at Graham, then at the clenched fist against his chest. She walked over to me and leaned in, her voice a soft, deadly murmur. "Look at him, Luna," she whispered. "He is shaking." I looked. His hands were trembling. Sweat was beading on his forehead. "He is not afraid of losing the house," Sloane said, her eyes fixed on Graham. "And he is not afraid of losing you. He is afraid of what you found. He is afraid of what that key opens." Graham backed away until he hit the staircase. He looked trapped. He looked dangerous. "If you keep pushing," he said, his voice dropping to a low, venomous growl, "if you keep trying to destroy me, you are going to destroy her memory too. Do you want the world to know what I asked? That your mother was a co-conspirator?" He said. A cruel smile twisted his lips. "You think she was innocent? You think she didn't know where the money came from? If you drag me into court, Luna, I will testify. I will tell them she signed everything willingly. I will tell them she helped me spend it. I will drag her name through the mud until everyone in this town thinks she was a thief just like me. Is that what you want?" I felt the blood drain from my face. He was holding Mom's reputation hostage. He knew that I wanted to protect her. Even now. "You are lying," I said. "Am I?" he challenged. "Can you be sure she loved you, Luna? But she loved her comfort too. Do not ask questions you cannot handle the answers to." He turned and ran up the stairs, the key still clutched in his hand. We heard a door slam and a lock click. I stood there, shaking. The doubt he had planted was a seed, and it was growing fast. Had Mom been part of it? Or had she just been too weak to stop it? Sloane touched my arm. "He is bluffing," she said. "He is trying to make you hesitate. Do not let him." I looked at the empty coat hook. "I need air," I said. I turned and walked out the front door. I needed to get away from the house, from the suffocation of his lies. I walked to the driveway. Mom's old sedan was parked there, covered in a layer of pollen. I hadn't driven it since she went into the hospital. I walked over to it. I didn't know why. Maybe I just wanted to sit in a space that was hers, a space Graham hadn't contaminated. I pulled the keys from my purse. Her car keys were on the same ring as the house key. I opened the driver's side door. The car smelled like peppermint and old upholstery. I sat in the driver's seat. I put my hands on the wheel. Then I remembered something. The note in the safety deposit box. "The records are in the basement, behind the furnace." Graham was in the house. I couldn't get to the basement, but Mom was resourceful. If she knew the basement wasn't safe, if she knew Graham was prowling, I looked at the glove compartment. Empty. I looked at the center console. Just loose change and a tire gauge. I got out of the car and walked to the trunk. I popped the latch. The lid groaned as it lifted. The trunk was mostly empty. A spare tire, a jumper cable kit, a blanket, but tucked under the blanket, wedged into the well of the spare tire, was a large manila envelope. It looked out of place. It was crisp, new. I reached in and pulled it out. It was stamped with the logo of the regional hospital where Mom had died. Medical Records Department. Confidential. I frowned. Why would Mom hide her own medical records in the trunk of her car? I opened the clasp. I pulled out a stack of papers. They were discharge summaries, test results, billing statements. I flipped through them, looking for anything unusual. Then I saw the consent for treatment form. It was dated 3 days before she died. The date she had been put on the ventilator. The form authorized a specific procedure, a risky procedure, one that the doctors had told me was a last resort, one they didn't recommend. I looked at the signature line. Patient signature Maria Kelly, but the line was blank. I looked at the next line. Authorized representative signature. There was a signature there. It was scrawled, messy, Graham Kelly. But that wasn't what stopped my heart. Stapled to the back of the consent form was a handwritten note on hospital stationery. It was a note from a doctor. Note to file. Husband insisted on procedure despite advisory of high mortality risk. Husband stated, quote, "We need to resolve this one way or another," unquote. I stared at the paper. He hadn't just watched her die. He had authorized the thing that killed her. He had gambled with her life because he was tired of waiting. Resolve this one way or another. He meant the debt. He meant the insurance. He meant me. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was another signature, the signature of the person who had picked up these records 2 weeks ago, received by Graham Kelly. But it wasn't Graham's signature. It was a perfect copy of my signature. He had signed my name to pick up the proof of his own crime. He was setting me up. If anyone investigated her death, my name was on the paperwork. My name was on the authorization. He wasn't just stealing my money. He was framing me for her murder. I looked up at the house. The window of the master bedroom was dark. He is not just a debtor, I whispered to the empty driveway. He is a killer, and he thinks he just buried the evidence in my name. I slammed the trunk shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I wasn't running anymore. I was going to burn his whole world down, just like Sloan said, and I was going to start with that key he was hiding upstairs. We regrouped at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, where Sloan had turned the penthouse suite into a fortress of solitude and high-speed internet. The contrast between the peeling paint of the house on Maple Hollow and the sterile, beige luxury of the hotel was jarring. I sat at a glass desk that cost more than my car, spreading out the stolen medical records. Rowan connected his laptop to the television screen on the wall. Sloan stood by the window, looking out at the city she had conquered, her back tense. We were not a family. We were a war room. I need the access logs, Rowan said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. I have a contact in the hospital administration. A favor owed from a forensic audit I did last year. He is pulling the visitor data and the digital signature metadata now. I looked at the papers I had taken from the trunk. The consent form with the forged signature lay on top. Graham signed this, I said, but the timestamp on the digital entry will tell us when. Got it, Rowan said. The screen flickered, then filled with a spreadsheet. It was a raw data dump from the hospital's security server. Rowan filtered the results. He narrowed it down to the week of Mom's death. Look at this, he said, pointing to a cluster of entries. November 14th, 11:30 at night, visitor badge scan. November 15th, 2:15 in the morning, visitor badge scan. November 16th, the night she died, 4 a.m., visitor badge scan. Who visits a dying woman at 4 in the morning, I asked. Someone who doesn't want witnesses, Sloan said. Turning from the window, Rowan pulled up the medication administration log and overlaid it with the visitor log. The correlation was perfect, and it was terrifying. Every time the visitor badge was scanned, the log showed that Mom had been administered a high dose of hydromorphone or lorazepam within the previous hour. They waited until she was high. I said, my voice shaking, they waited until she was pliable. Rowan clicked another file. This is the document log. On November 15th, at 2:30 in the morning, a digital notary pad was activated in her room. He opened the file. It was a document titled Asset Allocation Adjustment. It was a legal form that waived Mom's right to review financial transfers made by her spouse. It effectively gave Graham permission to loot the estate without her oversight. I looked at the signature. It was Mom's. But it was a scrawl, a line that trailed off the page. It was the signature of a woman who couldn't keep her eyes open. "This is invalid," I said. "She was under the influence of narcotics. Any court would throw this out, only if they know about it." Rowan said, "Graham has the physical copy. We only have the digital footprint. We need to see who was in the room." Sloan said, "The badge log just says guest. It doesn't give a name." Rowan tapped a key. "I am accessing the hallway security feed. The cameras are motion activated." The screen changed to a grainy black and white video feed. The timestamp read November 15th, 2:14 in the morning. The hallway was empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Then, the elevator doors at the far end of the hall opened. A figure stepped out. I leaned forward. The figure was a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered. He was wearing a black suit, a black shirt, and no tie. He moved with a precision that was not like Graham's shambling walk. He walked straight to Mom's room. He paused at the door, looked up at the camera, and then slipped inside. I froze. I knew that suit. I knew that walk. I looked at Sloan. "That is him," I whispered. Sloan frowned. "Who, the guy you brought to the funeral?" I said, standing up. "The guy who was guarding you. The guy in black." Sloan's face went pale. She looked at the screen, then at the man standing in the corner of the hotel room. Cyrus Vale. He had been standing there silently the whole time, his arms crossed. He was wearing the exact same outfit as the man in the video. Sloan looked at Cyrus, then she looked back at the screen. "Cyrus," she said, her voice dangerously low. "Where were you on November 15th? Cyrus didn't flinch. He walked over to the screen. He studied the figure in the video. "I was in London," he said. His voice was a deep rumble. "I was securing the perimeter for your board meeting. I checked the timestamp," I said, pointing at the screen. "That looks exactly like you. The height, the build, the clothes. It is a uniform," Cyrus said. He pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and held it up to me. It was a digital boarding pass. British Airways, London to New York, dated November 16th. "I was in the air when she died," Cyrus said, "and on the 15th, I was physically present at the embassy. I can pull the security logs from there if you need them." I looked at the boarding pass. It looked real. "But the man in the video," I said. "He is dressed like me," Cyrus said. "He is moving like me." He turned to Sloan. "Someone is trying to implicate your team. Ms. Mercer. They knew I was your primary handler. They dressed the part. It was a setup. A brilliant, twisted setup. If I had found this footage on my own, without Sloan there to verify, I would have gone straight to the police. I would have told them that my sister's bodyguard killed my mother. Graham would have been the grieving widower, and Sloan would have been the suspect. Graham isn't smart enough for this," I said. "He is a grifter, not a spy. He forgets which lie he told 5 minutes ago. He couldn't orchestrate a body double and a digital notary hack. He has help," Rowan said. He closed the video window and opened a browser. "Let us look at the money again," he said. "The LLC, Janus Holdings." He pulled up the corporate registry. Janus Holdings, Registered Agent, United Corporate Services, address 114 Industrial Way, Suite B, Indianapolis. "I know that address," I said. "It is a strip mall. Suite B is a mailbox rental store." "So it is a dead end," Sloan said, pacing the room. "A shell company with no physical footprint." "Not necessarily," I said. I sat down at the desk, pushing Rowan gently aside. "I work for Northline Risk and Compliance," I said. "We trace money laundering for insurance companies. I do not need a physical address. I need a routing number." I opened my work portal. I wasn't supposed to use it for personal matters. It was a fireable offense, but I didn't care. I was already past the point of no return. I typed in the tax identification number for Janus Holdings, which Rowan had found on the draft contract in the safety deposit box. The system churned. It was pulling data from the Interbank Clearinghouse network. "Here we go," I said, the screen filled with lines of transaction data. Janus Holdings was a busy little entity. In the last 6 months, it had received wire transfers totaling $400,000. "Where did the money come from?" Rowan asked. I traced the origin points. $75,000 from a home equity line of credit under Graham Kelly, $25,000 from a personal loan under Luna Kelly, $50,000 from the sale of stocks Mom's retirement fund. Graham was funneling everything into this shell. "But where is it going?" Sloan asked. "Money doesn't stay in a shell. It moves." I clicked on the outbound tab. There was one massive transfer. It was dated 3 days ago, the day before the funeral. Amount $380,000. Destination account name, SM Holdings. I stared at the name. Holdings. Sloan Mercer Holdings. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the hard drive. I turned slowly to look at my sister. Sloan stopped pacing. She looked at the screen. She looked at the name. "Luna." She said, "That is not me. It is your initials." I said, "It is your name." Sloan walked to the desk. She gripped the edge of it. Her knuckles white. "My holding company is Mercer Global," she said, "or SM Capital. I have never used SM Holdings." I looked at the bank routing number for the destination account. I typed it into the search bar. The bank popped up. It was a small, offshore bank in the Cayman Islands, a bank known for total secrecy. "It is a setup," Sloan said, her voice rising. "Just like the guy in the hallway. Graham is framing me. He sends the money to an account that looks like mine, so when the audit happens, it looks like I stole the family fortune." "It makes sense," Rowan said quietly. "Think about it. Graham hates you. Sloan, you are the one who escaped. You are the one who cut him off. What better revenge than to steal the money and frame you for the theft? He gets the cash, and you get the indictment, and Luna is the witness." Cyrus added, "Luna finds the debt. Luna investigates. Luna finds the transfer to her billionaire sister. It is the perfect narrative. The greedy rich sister comes back to town and loots the estate." I looked at the screen. It was a masterpiece of deception, but there was a flaw. I looked closer at the transaction details. The wire transfer was initiated at 9 a.m. I looked at Sloan. "Where were you at 9 a.m.? 3 days ago," I asked. "I was in flight," she said, "on a private jet. No Wi-Fi strong enough for a secure wire transfer of this size." I looked at the IP address of the sender. It traced back to a location in Indiana, Maple Hollow, but not the house. I clicked on the geolocation tool. The map zoomed in. The IP address wasn't coming from our house. It was coming from a commercial building on the other side of town. 121 Main Street. "I know that building," I said. I minimized the window and opened Google Maps. I typed in the address. Street view loaded. It was a small brick building with a green awning. The sign on the door was gold leaf, the law offices of Arthur Holloway, the family lawyer, the man who had read the will, the man who had sneered at the codicil. "He isn't just Graham's lawyer," I said. "He is the architect." Rowan leaned in. "Look at the signature on the wire authorization," he said. I zoomed in. It was a digital signature. Authorized by S. Mercer. But the S wasn't Sloan's sharp, angular S. It was looped. It matched the loop on the L in my forged signature on the loan. "It is the same hand," I said. "The same person forged my name on the debt, and your name on the theft." "It is Holloway," Sloan said. "Graham is the face, but Holloway is the brain. Graham is too emotional. Holloway is the one moving the pieces." My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text message. Sender, unknown. I opened it. There was a photo attached. It was a photo of me, taken through a window. I was sitting in the hotel room. I could see the back of Rowan's head. The text below it read, "If you submit that report to the FTC, you will find out who Sloan's real father is, and you will find out what your mother traded to get that $10,000. I dropped the phone on the desk. "They are watching us," I said. "Right now." Cyrus moved instantly. He went to the window and pulled the heavy curtains shut. Sloan picked up my phone. She read the message. Her face didn't change. "He is trying to blackmail us with history," she said. He thinks we care more about the past than the future. She looked at me. Do you care? Luna, she asked. Do you care who my father is? Do you care what Mom did 30 years ago? I looked at the medical records. I looked at the video of the fake Cyrus entering Mom's room. I looked at the stolen $380,000. I stood up. I don't care about the past. I said, Mom is dead. Whatever she did, she paid for it. But Graham and Holloway are alive, and they are holding my life for ransom. I looked at the text message again. He says I will find out what Mom traded. I said, I looked at the torn note from the safety deposit box. If Graham knows the truth about it wasn't about money, it wasn't about paternity, I think I know what the trade was. I said slowly, what Sloane asked. I think Mom didn't just trade her silence. I said, I think she traded the evidence. I think the reason Graham is so confident is that he thinks he has the only copy of whatever destroys him, but he doesn't. I said, I grabbed my bag. He forgot about the audit log. I said, he forged the medical forms, but he couldn't forge the server backup. We are going to file that report. I said, and then we are going to pay Mr. Holloway a visit. If he is the architect, let's see how he likes it when the building falls on him. Sloane smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. Cyrus, she said, get the car. We are going to a law office, and bring the jammer. I am done being tracked. The digital glow of the monitor cast long, skeletal shadows across the hotel suite. The silence stretched between Sloane and me, tighter than a piano wire. On the screen, the transaction record sat like a smoking gun, $380,000 wired to Sloane Mercer Holdings. I stood up from the desk, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. I looked at my sister. For the last 24 hours, I had let myself believe we were on the same side. I had let myself believe that the billionaire expatriate had returned to save the day. But I worked in risk management. I knew that the simplest explanation was usually the correct one. And the simplest explanation was that Sloane was just a bigger shark than Graham. Explain it, I said. My voice was low, devoid of the sisterly warmth that had begun to form between us. Sloane did not flinch. She stood by the window, her silhouette framed by the city lights. I told you, she said calmly. It is a frame. It is a wire transfer, I countered, pointing at the screen. It has your name on it. It went to an offshore account, and it emptied the last of the liquid assets in the estate. You said you came to stop him from stealing. It looks a lot like you just beat him to the punch. Cyrus took a step forward, his hand raising slightly in a placating gesture, but Sloane stopped him with a look. She walked over to the desk. She opened her own laptop, a sleek, silver device that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. She turned it around so I could see the screen. This is my corporate structure, she said. I looked. It was a complex web of entities, subsidiaries, and trusts. I bank in Zurich, Singapore, and New York, she said. I do not bank in the Cayman Islands, and I do not use shell companies with names as lazy as Sloane Mercer Holdings. She typed a command. A document appeared. This is a freezing injunction, she said. It is a legal maneuver. My lawyers filed it yesterday morning. It effectively locks any account associated with Graham or the estate. It creates a hold status. If I wanted to steal that money, Luna, I would not have filed a court order alerting the entire banking system to watch the accounts. I read the document. It was dated and time-stamped 24 hours before the suspicious wire transfer. If you froze the accounts, I said, looking up, how did the money move? Because the freeze applies to legitimate transactions, Rowan interjected from the couch. He was holding a stack of printed papers, his eyes scanning them rapidly. But this wire transfer, it bypassed the standard SWIFT network. It was routed through a correspondent bank in Miami first. Rowan stood up and threw the papers on the desk. It was not Sloane, he said, and it was not Graham. Graham does not know what a correspondent bank is. Graham thinks laundering means washing his clothes. Then who, I asked? Rowan pointed to a name buried in the metadata of the wire instruction. It was not a name, actually. It was a code. A.H. Escrow. H, I whispered. Arthur Holloway, the family lawyer. Sloane said. Her voice was ice. Rowan nodded. I just ran a background check on Holloway's firm. Not the surface check, but the deep dive. He is not just a small-town probate lawyer. He is a silent partner in 3 different debt consolidation firms. Rowan spread the papers out. They were court dockets. Dozens of them. Look at the pattern, he said. He targets families in distress, usually widows or elderly couples with significant home equity. He offers to restructure their debt. He sets up a shell company. He convinces them to sign over the deed for protection. Then he drains the equity, defaults on the loans, and buys the property back at auction through another shell. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a factory, a foreclosure factory. And Mom, I asked. She was the perfect target. Rowan said. She was sick. She was hiding financial secrets. And she had a husband who was desperate for cash. Holloway didn't just help Graham. He weaponized him. He used Graham's greed to get the door open, and then he walked in and stripped the house bare. I looked at the transaction on the screen again. So he created Sloane Mercer Holdings. I realized. He set up the fake account. He moved the money there so that when the audit happens, it leads straight to me. Sloane finished. He knows I am the only one with the resources to fight him, so he wants to disqualify me. He wants to paint me as the predator so the judge will grant him full control of the estate. I sat down heavily. The scope of it was nauseating. We were not just fighting a bad father. We were fighting a professional liquidation machine. I looked at Sloane. I felt a wave of shame. I had doubted her. I had assumed the worst because it was easier to believe she was greedy than to believe she was innocent. I am sorry, I said quietly. I saw the name and I panicked. Sloane closed her laptop. She walked over to where I was sitting. For the first time, she didn't look like a titan of industry. She looked like a tired, older sister. I do not blame you, she said. You have spent your whole life being told that money is a weapon. Why wouldn't you think I was using it? She pulled up a chair and sat opposite me. Can I tell you the truth? She asked. I nodded. For years. I thought you were in on it, she said. I stared at her. Me. Sloane nodded. I saw you staying there. I saw you paying the bills. I saw you living in that town. I thought you were doing it because you wanted his approval. I thought you were the good daughter who was happy to enable him, as long as he patted you on the head. I thought you were weak. Luna, or worse, that you were waiting for your cut. I felt tears prick my eyes. I wasn't waiting for a cut. I was waiting for a thank you that never came. I stayed because I thought I was the dam. I said, I thought if I left, the water would drown Mom. I know that now. Sloane said. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was firm. When Mom called me that night when she was crying, she didn't talk about herself. She talked about you. She said, Sloane, you have to save Luna. He is going to eat her alive. That was when I knew. You weren't his partner. You were his final meal. We sat there for a moment, the silence no longer hostile. It was the silence of 2 soldiers realizing they had been shooting at each other in the dark, and finally seeing the real enemy on the horizon. Okay, I said, wiping my eyes. We know who the enemy is. We know how he operates. Now, how do we kill him? Rowan cleared his throat. We go to probate, he said, but we do not go to defend. We go to prosecute. He pulled a whiteboard over from the corner of the suite. He picked up a marker. We have the forged medical consent form, he wrote. That proves undue influence and elder abuse. We have the fake Sloane account. I added, I can trace the IP address to Holloway's office. That proves fraud and embezzlement. We have the credit inquiries. Sloane said, the ones made at 3 a.m. That proves identity theft. And we have the camera footage from the hospital. Cyrus said from the corner, the man in the black suit. Rowan nodded. We build a timeline. We show the judge that every single move Graham made in the last 6 months was orchestrated by Holloway to bypass the will and liquidate the assets before probate even started. But we have to be careful. I said, Holloway knows the law better than we do. He will have an answer for everything. He will say Mom consented. He will say the signatures are real. Then we prove they are not. Sloane said. She turned to me. You said you work in risk compliance. You analyze patterns. Yes, I said. Then analyze Graham. She said, find the glitch. Graham is sloppy. Holloway is precise. The crack in their armor will be where Graham tried to improvise. I thought about the key. The key I had found in Mom's coat. The one Graham had snatched back with such terror. The key. I said, he is terrified of that key. It doesn't fit the house. It doesn't fit the car. It is a storage unit, Rowan said, or a lockbox, if Holloway is the architect, I said, thinking aloud. Then Graham is just the employee. Employees always keep insurance. They keep something to protect themselves in case the boss decides to cut them loose. Graham kept something. I said, that is what is behind the furnace, or in the shed, or wherever that key goes. We need to file the petition tomorrow. Sloane said, we need to force them into the light. Once we file the fraud allegations, the assets are frozen. Holloway can't move the money out of the Cayman account. But once we file, I said, they will know we are coming. They will attack. Let them attack. Sloane said, I have lawyers who eat men like Holloway for breakfast. But we need you. Luna, you are the witness. You are the one who lived in the house. You are the one who can look the judge in the eye and say, that is not my signature. I looked at the three of them. Sloane, the power, Rowan, the logic, Cyrus, the shield. And me? The evidence. I will do it. I said, I will sign the affidavit. I will accuse him. We spent the next 6 hours building the file. We scanned every document. We organized the emails. We built a visual map of the fraud that was so clear even a child could understand it. By midnight, we were done. The petition was ready to be filed at the courthouse as soon as the doors opened at 8 o'clock. I stood by the window, looking out at the sleeping city. I felt exhausted, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy. The weight of the secret was gone. My phone buzzed on the glass desk. I walked over to pick it up. I expected it to be a confirmation from the online filing system. It was a text message. From a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. The screen was bright in the dim room. Subject final warning. The body of the text was short. If you file those papers tomorrow, you will destroy more than just Graham. You want the truth, fine. But are you ready to know who Sloane's father really is? And are you ready to know what your mother traded to get that money? She didn't just sell her silence. Luna, she sold you. I stared at the words. She sold you. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Sloane, who was asleep on the couch, her face soft in the shadows. He was bluffing. He had to be. Mom was a victim. She was weak. Yes, but she wouldn't have sold me. But the doubt was a worm, and it was burrowing deep. I looked at the phone again. There was a second message. Check your email. I opened my email app. There was a message from an anonymous sender. Attached was a single image. It was a scan of a document. It looked old, 34 years old. It was an adoption agreement. But it wasn't a standard adoption. It was a private contract. I zoomed in on the terms. Party A. The biological father agrees to pay the sum of $500,000 to Party B, Maria Kelly. In exchange, Party B agrees to assume full legal custody of the infant Luna and permanently waive any right to child support, inheritance, or contact with Party A. And then, the kicker. Party B agrees that the infant shall never know the identity of Party A. If this clause is breached, Party B agrees to repay the full sum with interest. I looked at the signature, Maria Kelly, and below it, the signature of Party A. It was redacted, blacked out with heavy marker, but the date was clear. It was signed 3 days after I was born. I felt like the floor had opened up. Mom hadn't just protected me. She had been paid to keep me. The $500,000 that was the money Graham had lived on for years. That was the family money. I wasn't just a daughter. I was a transaction. I was the golden goose that had laid the first egg, and Graham had been eating off it for 3 decades. I looked at Sloane. Did she know if I filed the papers, this would come out? It would be part of the public record. The world would know that my mother took $500,000 to hide my father. I looked at the sleeping form of my sister. I remembered what she said. "He is not our dad. He is just yours." She was wrong. He wasn't mine, and apparently, neither was my mother. I gripped the phone. The pain was blinding. But then, a cold, hard clarity washed over me. They used this to control Mom. They used this guilt to make her compliant. They think they can use it to control me. I looked at the text message again. I typed a reply. My fingers didn't shake. I typed, "Bring it." I hit send. I wasn't Mom. I wasn't going to be blackmailed into silence. If the truth burned everything down, then I would stand in the ashes and build something new. I turned to the computer. I hit the button to submit the probate filing. Upload complete. The war was on. The probate court of Maple Hollow was not designed for drama. It was a room of beige carpet, fluorescent lighting, and the smell of stale coffee and bureaucracy. It was a place where bored clerks stamped forms and families quietly argued over china sets. But today, the air in courtroom 3 was thick enough to choke on. I sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Rowan and Sloane's lead counsel, a woman named Eleanor Vance, who wore a suit sharp enough to cut glass. Sloane sat behind me, a silent, imposing force, across the aisle. Graham sat with Arthur Holloway. Graham had chosen his costume carefully. He was not wearing the sharp suit from the funeral. Instead, he wore a soft, oatmeal-colored cardigan and corduroy pants. He held a handkerchief in his hand, which he dabbed at his dry eyes every time the judge looked in his direction. He was playing the role of the bewildered, grieving widower to perfection. He looked like a man who just wanted to mourn, but was being bullied by his greedy, estranged daughters. Judge Reynolds, a man with a face like a crumpled paper bag and zero patience for theatrics, tapped his gavel. "We are here regarding the estate of Maria Kelly," Judge Reynolds said. "We have a petition to freeze assets based on allegations of fraud, and a counter-motion to validate outstanding debts against the estate. Mr. Holloway, you may proceed." Holloway stood up. He smoothed his tie. He had the slick, practiced confidence of a man who knew exactly where the bodies were buried because he had dug the holes himself. "Your Honor," Holloway began, his voice dripping with faux sincerity, "this is a tragedy, a simple tragedy. Mr. Kelly has lost his wife of 30 years, and now, while the dirt is still fresh, his stepdaughter, who has been absent for years, has swept in with her high-priced legal team to terrorize him." He gestured to Sloane, then to me. "Ms. Luna Kelly has been the co-signer on the family's financial instruments for years." Holloway continued. "She was a willing participant. She stepped up to help her mother. Now, influenced by the sudden appearance of her billionaire sister, she is trying to renege on those obligations. She is trying to leave her grieving father with debts they took on together as a family unit." He picked up a piece of paper. "We have a home equity line of credit for $150,000, he said. "Signed by Luna Kelly. We have personal loans. Signed by Luna Kelly. These are not frauds, Your Honor. These are the desperate measures of a family trying to pay for medical care. To call them fraud now is simply buyer's remorse." Judge Reynolds looked at me. "Ms. Kelly, do you deny signing these documents?" I stood up. My legs felt steady. The fear that had paralyzed me for years was gone. Replaced by the cold clarity of the evidence in front of me, I did not sign them. "Your Honor," I said clearly, and neither did my mother. Holloway scoffed. "We have notarized acknowledgments." Rowan stood up. He didn't use flowery language. He placed a thick binder on the judge's bench. "Your Honor," Rowan said, "if you look at tab A, you will see a forensic analysis of the digital applications for these loans." The judge opened the binder. Every single application was submitted between 2 and 4 in the morning. Rowan said, "From an IP address registered to the residence of Graham Kelly, at those hours, my client was in her own apartment, 2 hours away. We have cell tower data to prove her location." Rowan flipped a page. "Furthermore, look at the verification phone number listed on the applications. It ends in 0198. Ms. Kelly's actual number ends in 0199. We called the number on the application. It is a burner phone." We traced the purchase of that phone to a convenience store in Maple Hollow. He held up a still image from a security camera. It showed Graham Kelly, wearing a baseball cap, buying the phone with cash. Graham shifted in his seat. The grieving widower act faltered for a second. That is circumstantial. Holloway argued. Mr. Kelly buys phones for work. Rowan ignored him. He turned to the judge. But the smoking gun is not the phone, Your Honor. It is the handwriting. Rowan projected an image onto the screen mounted on the wall. On the left was the signature from the home equity line. On the right was a piece of paper that looked like it had been fished out of a trash can. It was wrinkled and stained with coffee. We recovered this from the recycling bin in the defendant's home office. Rowan said. The page was covered in scribbles. It was a practice sheet. Someone had written Luna Kelly over and over again, 50 times, trying to get the loop of the L just right, trying to match the slant. And at the bottom of the page, Rowan said, the writer got frustrated. They wrote a note to themselves. Too tight. Relax the wrist. Rowan zoomed in on the note. We had a handwriting analyst compare that note to known samples of Mr. Graham Kelly's writing. Rowan said, it is a 100% match. A man does not practice his own daughter's signature 50 times unless he intends to use it without her permission. The courtroom was silent. Judge Reynolds looked at the screen, then at Graham. Graham was gripping the table, his knuckles white. Mr. Holloway, the judge asked, do you have an explanation for why your client was rehearsing his daughter's signature? Holloway didn't blink. He was a professional. He knew when a battle was lost, and he knew how to pivot to the next trench. Mr. Kelly was distraught. Holloway said smoothly. His wife was dying. He was managing a mountain of paperwork. Perhaps he was testing pens. But that is irrelevant, Your Honor, because those loans are not the primary issue today. Holloway reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a blue folder. The primary issue is the estate itself, Holloway said. And the fact that the plaintiffs are operating under an outdated will. I felt a chill run down my spine. Sloan leaned forward. We have a new last will and testament, Holloway announced, signed by Maria Kelly 3 weeks before she died. He walked up to the bench and handed the document to the judge. He dropped a copy on our table. I grabbed it. My eyes scanned the text. It was short. It revoked all previous wills. It left the house, the cars, and the residuary estate, which would include any hidden funds entirely to Graham Kelly. It explicitly disinherited Sloan Mercer. And it left me, my love and gratitude, but 0 assets. The signature at the bottom was shaky. It looked like Mom's writing when she was heavily medicated. This changes everything, Holloway said, a smug smile touching his lips. As the sole beneficiary, Mr. Kelly has the right to manage the assets as he sees fit. The fraud allegations are moot because, effectively, he was borrowing from himself. Graham sat up straighter. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped completely. He looked triumphant. He looked like he had just played the ace he had been holding up his sleeve for 30 years. Judge Reynolds studied the document. This appears to be in order. It is witnessed. I looked at the witness names. They were 2 people I didn't know. Probably friends of Holloway. It is a forgery. I whispered to Sloan. Mom would never do this. She wrote that letter in the safety deposit box. She wanted to protect us. Sloan didn't answer. She was looking at the document with a jeweler's loop she had pulled from her purse. She was studying the paper itself. Then she handed the loop to Cyrus. Check the code, she said. Cyrus looked. He nodded. Sloan stood up. Your Honor? She said. Her voice was calm, contrasting with the panic rising in my throat. May I approach? The judge nodded. Sloan walked to the bench. She didn't look at Graham. She looked at the document in the judge's hand. Mr. Holloway claims this document was signed 3 weeks ago. Sloan said, that would be October 21st. Correct, Holloway said. Sloan pointed to the bottom corner of the paper. This document is printed on legal stock from a specific manufacturer. Sloan said, you can see the batch code here in the watermark. It is faint, but it is there. She pulled out her phone and opened a website. I am on the manufacturer's website, she said. I am entering the batch code, XJ942. She held the phone up for the judge to see. This batch of paper was manufactured on November 1st. Sloane said, 10 days after my mother supposedly signed this will. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens when a bomb stops ticking and simply sits there, waiting. Unless my mother was a time traveler, Sloane said, her voice turning into a blade. She could not have signed a document on paper that did not exist yet. I looked at Graham. His face had gone gray. He looked at Holloway, panic flaring in his eyes. Holloway froze. For the first time, the smooth lawyer looked rattled. He grabbed the copy from our table and held it up to the light, checking the watermark. It seems, Sloane said, turning to face them, that in your rush to steal everything, you forgot to check the supply closet inventory. Judge Reynolds slammed the document down on his desk. His face was red. Mr. Holloway, he boomed, you had better have a spectacular explanation for this. My client Holloway stammered. My client provided the document. I assumed. You assumed you could play this court for a fool, the judge snapped. He looked at Graham. Mr. Kelly, I am placing an immediate injunction on every asset in your name. I am ordering a full forensic audit of this new will. And if I find one more discrepancy, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Graham shrank into his cardigan. He looked small. He looked defeated, but he didn't look stopped. He looked at me, and his eyes were full of a dark, festering hate. He mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, but I read his lips. You will pay. Judge Reynolds banged his gavel. We will reconvene in 48 hours for a final evidentiary hearing. The judge ordered, I want every bank record, every medical log, and every witness ready, and Mr. Kelly, do not leave the state. The bailiff moved to stand near Graham, not arresting him yet, but marking him. We walked out of the courtroom. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me shaking. We had won the skirmish, but the war wasn't over. Graham was cornered, and cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. Sloane put her arm around my shoulders. You did good, she said. We caught them. I said, the paper batch. That was brilliant. Cyrus keeps track of everything. Sloane said, even paper supply chains. We walked through the heavy double doors into the hallway. The air was cooler out here. Ms. Kelly. A voice called out from a bench near the exit. I turned. A woman was standing there. She was older, wearing a raincoat and holding a large handbag. She looked nervous. I recognized her instantly. It was Mrs. Gable. She had been Mom's best friend for 20 years. They used to play bridge together on Tuesdays. Mrs. Gable, I asked, what are you doing here? She walked over, clutching her bag tight. She looked around to make sure Graham wasn't behind us. I was in the back, she whispered. I saw what happened. I saw him lie about the will. She reached into her bag. Her hands were trembling. Your mother gave me this. She said, about a month ago. She came to my house. She was scared. Luna. She said Graham was listening to her calls. She said she couldn't keep it in the house anymore. She pulled out a small, black object. It was an old-fashioned dictaphone, the kind doctors used to use. She told me, if Graham looks like he's winning, you give this to Luna. Mrs. Gable said. She made me swear. I took the recorder. It felt heavy. Thank you, Mrs. Gable, I said. She touched my cheek. She loved you girls. She said, she made mistakes, big ones, but she loved you. She turned and hurried away, as if afraid Graham would appear in a puff of smoke. I looked at the recorder. There was a small cassette inside. Play it, Sloane said. We stepped into a quiet alcove. Cyrus stood guard, blocking the view from the courtroom doors. I pressed the play button. The tape hissed. Then, Mom's voice cut through the static. It was weak, breathless, but clear. Luna, she said, if you are listening to this, I failed. I couldn't stop him. There was a pause, the sound of her breathing heavy. I know you found out about the money, about the adoption. I am so sorry. I sold my rights to keep you safe, but I ended up selling you to a man who saw you as a paycheck. I closed my eyes. Hearing her admit it hurt more than reading it. But you need to know. Mom continued. Her voice dropped to a terrified whisper. The adoption contract, the money, that is not the only leverage he has. Graham isn't just a thief. Luna, he is a cleaner. I opened my eyes. A cleaner 30 years ago, she whispered. The night your biological father supposedly died, Graham was there. He wasn't just a witness. Luna, he fixed it. That is why the trust pays him. That is why they never ask questions. He knows where the body really is. The tape clicked off. I stared at the device. My biological father didn't die in a car crash. And he didn't just pay to get rid of me. Graham had fixed it. Sloane's face was white. He is not just a con artist, she whispered. He is a blackmailer. He has been blackmailing my father's family and your father's estate for a murder. The text message from the night before flashed in my mind. He is not the only thing you need to fear. I looked back at the courtroom doors. Graham was still in there. He wasn't fighting for the house. He wasn't fighting for the money. He was fighting to keep the basement closed. Because if we opened it, we wouldn't just find stolen cash. We would find the reason my father never came for me. I put the recorder in my pocket. Let's go, I said. My voice was harder than it had ever been. We are not waiting for the hearing. We are going back to the house, and we are taking a sledgehammer to that basement floor. The 48 hours leading up to the final hearing were a blur of caffeine, toner cartridges, and the cold, hard realization that my entire life had been a fabrication. We did not go back to the house to smash the basement floor. Rowan advised against it. He said that if we destroyed the physical structure, Graham could claim we tampered with evidence. Instead, we handed the recording from Mrs. Gable to the district attorney and let the wheels of criminal justice begin to turn in the background. But the probate hearing, the battle for my name, my debt, and my freedom, that was the main event, and I was ready to end it. We returned to courtroom 3 at 9 o'clock on Friday morning. The atmosphere had shifted. Graham was no longer wearing his cozy cardigan. He was back in a suit, but it looked too big for him, as if he had shrunk under the weight of the looming exposure. Arthur Holloway sat beside him, drumming his fingers on the table, his confident veneer showing hairline fractures. Judge Reynolds entered the room. He did not look at the gallery. He looked straight at the defense table. Mr. Holloway, the judge said, his voice flat. I trust you have an explanation for the paper batch discrepancy we discovered in the last session. Holloway stood up. We are withdrawing the document titled Last Will and Testament, Your Honor. My client misremembered the date of signing. We are reverting to the original will. The judge narrowed his eyes. Misremembered. I will note that for the record. Now, the plaintiffs have submitted new evidence, a substantial amount of it. Rowan stood up. He walked to the center of the room. He held the small black dictaphone in his hand as if it were a grenade. Your Honor, Rowan said, we would like to enter Exhibit C into the record. This is a recording made by the deceased, Maria Kelly, 4 weeks prior to her death. It was entrusted to a third party who has sworn an affidavit regarding its chain of custody. Objection, Holloway said, though his voice lacked heat. Hearsay. The deceased cannot be cross-examined. This falls under the exception of a dying declaration, Rowan countered, and more importantly, it speaks directly to the state of mind of the testator regarding the financial instruments in question. Judge Reynolds nodded. Play it. Rowan pressed the button. The hiss of the tape filled the silent courtroom. Then, Mom's voice, weak, terrified, and heartbreakingly familiar, echoed off the walls. It is a trap, Luna. It was always a trap. Graham flinched. He stared at the table, refusing to look at the recorder. The recording continued. Graham and Arthur, they sat me down last night. They told me the money from the trust was gone. They said if I didn't sign the power of attorney, they would release the adoption papers. They would tell the world who Sloane's father is, but that is not all. There was a pause on the tape, a ragged intake of breath. They need you. Luna, they need your credit score. Graham cannot borrow money anymore. His name is blacklisted in 3 states. They need a clean name to wash the debt through. You are not just my daughter to them. You are the shield. They are going to pile the debt on you so that when the house of cards falls, you are the one buried under the rubble. Arthur called it insulating the liability. The tape clicked off. The silence that followed was heavier than lead. I looked at Graham. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Holloway, and Holloway was looking at the exit sign. Insulating the liability. That was what I was. I wasn't the responsible child. I wasn't the good daughter. I was a human shell company. Rowan placed the recorder on the judge's bench. We have traced the flow of funds. Your Honor, Rowan said. He projected a new chart onto the screen. The $150,000 from the home equity line, the $25,000 from the funeral loan, the credit card cash advances. None of it went to medical bills. He pointed to a large red block on the chart. 80% of the funds were transferred to a firm called ACH Consulting. Rowan said, We subpoenaed the bank records of ACH Consulting. The signatory is Arthur Holloway. The judge turned his gaze on the lawyer. Rowan continued, These were not legal fees. These were payments for silence. Payments to maintain the network of shell companies that Mr. Kelly used to hide his past. And payments to the cleaner services that Mr. Kelly has been utilizing since 1990. Graham slammed his hand on the table. That is a lie, he shouted. He stood up, his face red. I was protecting this family. I did what I had to do. Sit down, Mr. Kelly, the judge barked, but Graham was unraveling. The narrative he had built for 30 years, the story of the sacrificing father. The martyr was dissolving. She was expensive, Graham yelled, pointing at the empty space where Mom used to be. Her silence cost money. The blackmails cost money. I had to pay them off. And Luna, she had a job. She had good credit. Why shouldn't she contribute? I raised her. I bought her clothes. I gave her a name. She owed me. There it was. The transactional truth. He believed he had purchased the right to destroy me. Sloane stood up next. She didn't shout. She didn't yell. She walked to the witness stand with the grace of a predator. Ms. Mercer, the judge said. Sloane placed a file on the ledge. Mr. Kelly claims he was protecting the family, Sloane said. But here's the correspondence between Graham Kelly and the trustees of my biological father's estate. She opened the file. He attempted to petition for guardianship of my trust fund 6 times after I turned 18. Sloane said, he forged letters from my mother claiming I was mentally unstable. He tried to have me committed to a facility in Nevada so he could assume power of attorney over my assets. She looked directly at Graham. He didn't want to protect us. She said, he wanted to consume us. And when I escaped, he turned his appetite toward the only thing left, my sister. Graham was shaking his head, muttering to himself, and finally, Cyrus stepped forward. He placed a laptop on the clerk's desk. Regarding the allegation that Ms. Mercer attempted to loot the estate via the Cayman Island transfer, Cyrus said, We have identified the individual who initiated the wire. He played the video from the hospital hallway, the man in the black suit. Then he played a second video. It was surveillance footage from the parking lot of Holloway's law firm. The same man walked out of the office. He took off the black jacket. He got into a Honda Civic. We ran the plates. Cyrus said, The car is registered to Marcus Dean. He is a paralegal employed by Holloway and Associates. Cyrus looked at Holloway. He is not a bodyguard, Cyrus said. He is an actor, and he was paid $5,000 from the ACH consulting account on the day of the transfer. It was over. The frame was broken. The lies were exposed. Judge Reynolds took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked like a man who wanted to take a shower. I have heard enough, the judge said. He picked up his gavel. It felt like he was picking up a weapon. Mr. Holloway, the judge said, his voice deadly quiet. I am referring you to the State Bar Association for immediate disbarment. I am also referring this entire file, including the evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and elder abuse, to the district attorney. Holloway slumped in his chair. He knew the game was up, and Mr. Kelly, the judge continued, turning his eyes to Graham. Graham looked up. He looked small. He looked old. The petition to validate the debts against the estate is denied. The judge ruled, The court finds that these debts were incurred through fraudulent means and identity theft. Ms. Luna Kelly is absolved of all liability regarding the home equity line, the personal loans, and the credit cards opened in her name. I let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck in my chest for 10 years. Furthermore, the judge said, I am issuing an immediate order of protection. Mr. Kelly, you are to vacate the property at 402 Maple Avenue immediately. The house is remanded to the original trust, with Ms. Luna Kelly as the sole trustee until probate is finalized. Graham stood up. But where will I go? He stammered. That is my house. It never was. The judge said, You were just a squatter with a marriage license. The gavel banged. Case closed. 2 bailiffs moved toward the defense table. They weren't there to escort them out. They were there to take them into custody. The district attorney hadn't waited. The recording about the cleaner and the body had triggered an immediate arrest warrant. Graham looked at me as the bailiff took his arm. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked confused. He looked like a man who couldn't understand why his calculator had stopped working. I did it for you. Luna, he whispered, I made you tough. I looked him in the eye. You didn't make me tough. Graham, I said, you just made me tired. And now, I am going to rest. He was led away. I watched him go. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel happy. I felt light. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air smelled of autumn leaves and freedom. Rowan was on his phone, already coordinating with the credit bureaus to wipe the inquiries from my report. Cyrus was scanning the perimeter. Ever the protector. Sloane stopped on the steps. She put on her sunglasses. It is done, she said. I looked at the documents in my hand, the court order, the freedom papers. I turned to her. You were right, I said, about what she asked, about what you whispered at the funeral. I said, he is not our dad. He is just yours. I shook my head. I misunderstood you. I said, I thought you were telling me that I was alone, that I was stuck with him. Sloane lowered her sunglasses. No, she said softly. I was telling you that he was your burden because you were the only one strong enough to carry it. But I should have told you to put it down sooner. I looked at the street. I looked at the world that was opening up in front of me. A world without debt, without fear, without the crushing weight of being the good daughter. I thought about the adoption papers, the money Mom took, the secrets in the basement that the police were uncovering right now. It was a tragedy. It was a horror story. But it wasn't my story anymore. So, Sloane asked, now that you know everything, now that the slate is clean, what do you choose? She gestured to the waiting car. You can go back to your job, she said. You can pretend this never happened, or you can come with me. Mercer Global needs a director of risk compliance, someone who can spot a lie in a spreadsheet from a mile away. I looked at Rowan. He gave me a small nod. I looked at the courthouse behind me. I smiled. It was the first real smile I had felt in months. You were right. Sloane, I said, he is not our dad. He was just the excuse. He was the excuse Mom used to be afraid. He was the excuse I used to be small. I took a step down the stairs, and today, I said, I stopped being the price of their silence. I walked toward the car, leaving the shadow of the courthouse behind me. I wasn't Luna the victim. I wasn't Luna the shield. I was just Luna. And for the first time in 34 years, the account was paid in full. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I poured a lot of emotion into Luna's journey, and I hope you felt that liberation at the end as much as I did. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from a busy subway in New York, a quiet room in London, or maybe somewhere sunny like California? Please leave a comment below and share your location. Let's see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this family drama and want more stories where the truth finally comes to light, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who need to hear that it is never too late to break free. See you in the next story.